All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regularly scheduled council meeting for February the 10th. My name is Kevin Murdoch. I'm the mayor of Oak Bay. I'll be chairing the meeting. All of council's here in the office or in the chambers, except for Councillor Appleton, who is having to join us remotely. So the technology seems to work, so that's a good sign. As we call the meeting to order, we'd just like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt or Kasapsum nations, and just that their connections to these lands continue to this day. Our first formal order of business is approval of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you. Any discussion or changes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We have adoption of the minutes. We have two from January 20th, the 5 and the 7 p.m., moved and seconded. Are there any corrections, changes, or amendments to the minutes? Not seeing any here or online. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Do we have the technical issues worked out? Okay, good. Well, welcome everyone to our meeting. And under Mayor's remarks, I'll try and keep this brief, but there's a lot to sort of just bring council and the public up to date on. A couple of sort of things we've had some public inquiries on, so I thought I'd share them. Our Windsor Park playground has had a bit of a hiccup in finalizing it, so it looks like the final date for the pieces and parts to come in to finish that is February the 16th. The Uplands Boardwalk, if you've been noticing that those are going in, the first phase of that is completing this week. The next section, the second section, which is the wettest part, will be starting next week. And then, of course, the gravel and pieces will be going in as well. So that work is underway, but it's nice you can actually have a path over the most heavily used portion at this point already. I just want to point out that at the end of this agenda, there is a letter from the province just noting the appointment of a housing advisor. That's not a piece for that we are taking public input on. We just have to formally receive it, but I thought I would just make a note for those interested. That advisor did start last week, and they're working with staff. They'll have the report going back to the province at the end of March. I just, over the last couple of weeks, as we all do, we all have multiple hats that we wear in different organizations around the region. So I'll just run through a few of those First Council's interest. The Alliance to End Homelessness in the Capital Region Board met, and I think just probably of interest is just, again, the issues of stable funding. Is always difficult, but there's a lot of work going on right now to coordinate resources and service providers across the region, and some pretty positive work happening with the province on their HIFIS, which is the Homeless Individuals and Families Information System program, which is intended to streamline and make sure that nobody falls through the cracks in all the different systems. So it's good to see that advancing. I'll skip a couple of these little minor things, but I just think it's worthwhile for the public and the council to be aware as well. I also sit on the BC Association of Police Boards executive, and one of the things that's really coming to a head right now is the lack of funding for the Justice Institute, and that limits the number of police being trained. So it's for a number of years now, the number of police that have been able to be trained just because of constraints at the Justice Institute have been well below the replacement numbers, and so every police jurisdiction, municipal police jurisdiction in the province right now is struggling to staff because there are just simply not enough police officers. And what used to be pretty common to get people out of the RCMP is no longer quite so prolific. So it's becoming quite a piece, and you'll probably start hearing about that as some of the budget deliberations happen at the province, but also just as some of these issues come to the fore as policing. It's hard to staff some of the specialized and integrated units going forward. So I think it's just helpful for people to have a sense of what that's happening. I do want to thank the Chinese Consolidated Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, who hosted their annual Chinese New Year celebration this week as well, which we are one of the only 2 municipal invites with our relationship at the Harling Point Chinese Cemetery. And just also, I think, for personal interest of people here, the CRD board meeting, there's a number of items on the agenda, of course, but of interest, I think, is contemplation of a new biodiversity and environmental stewardship coordination service, and a contemplation of a new foodlands access service. So those are 2 things that are going to be looked at. And last but not least, I just want to express my appreciation to staff and to council. We held our first town hall in a very long time 2 Thursdays ago, And we had about 170 people turn out, so quite a few more than we were expecting, which meant some scrambling to find seats and have audio available. But I just want to express my appreciation both for staff and council who were running around trying to set up chairs and all the people who came out to ask questions and participate in that. So we are anticipating having those on a fairly regular basis, both in person and virtual. So I think that ability just to take any questions and answer them to the community, I think is a really valuable one. And certainly we do that through our public participation period every week, but that is just kind of a nice format for people to come out in a bit more informal setting. That concludes my remarks as mayor, but that moves us to public comment and question period, which is the opportunity to come and talk to us. If there's things on the agenda tonight, then this is not the chance to talk to those. But there will be, if they're available for public input, then they'll have opportunity at that time for public input. But this is just a chance, kind of like the town hall, if there's points of interest or that are related to Oak Bay that you want to talk to council about, questions or comments, this is the opportunity to do so. I imagine most people, when you have a house this full, it's usually around things on the agenda of interest, but certainly take anybody who wishes to come forward. I see someone coming forward, so please come up. And you can help demonstrate the process. You can just state your name and municipality of residence, and then you have up to 3 minutes. And welcome.
Hi, I'm Jane Evans. I'm with Oak Bay. And I'm just reporting today some good and hopeful news to council and residents. In the beginning of January, volunteers with the Friends of Oka Creek and Peninsula Streams Society deposited 18,350 chum salmon eggs into incubation boxes in Bowker Creek. And today they're at the Alevin stage. Actually, I heard that perhaps they're starting already to get to the fry stage. And perhaps at the end of February, we'll be releasing them into the creek from the incubation boxes. And we're quite excited about it, obviously. And these fry stay approximately 1 to 3 weeks in the creek before they make their huge journey out into the ocean. And this is really important because salmon represents so much to our wider community and to the health of our natural areas. Bowker Creek is one of our natural assets that not only provides space for wildlife, but also opportunity for climate impact mitigation. Volunteers are working to improve the biodiversity and health of this natural asset and other natural areas in our community. And I'm interested and hopeful to hear how council, in the future, how council and staff will recognize the importance of our natural assets. And in fact, I've been reading recently that there's more talk about it, and it is something that is sort of new, but you've been including it in your planning. So hopefully it marches forward. I'm interested and hopeful to hear how council and staff will recognize the importance of these natural assets, what strategies will be developed to manage these assets and services they provide. For example, you could look through the community to see where you could plan for the natural treatment of our stormwater before it reaches the creek or any of our waterways, or further naturalize Bowker Creek in stream and on the shore, or embedding Bowker Creek blueprint guidelines into the proposed planning of Oak Bay Public Safety Building. So there's just some ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Evans. That was very welcome. And you're right, there is a natural, please come forward. There is work, we're heavily into our asset management planning process, lots of investment in that. The natural asset planning is a little bit, after our underground infrastructure, but still it's part of our overall planning process. So thank you for that. Welcome. Same process, turn the microphone on, name, and municipality.
Three things, I think. The first thing is...
Can you just state your name for the record, just so it's on the...
Kathleen, live at Windsor Park. The first thing is I wonder if you can increase the sound of the mic so that we can hear more clearly. It was hard to hear everything you were saying, and even more difficult with this mic. Second thing is
we can move it a bit closer.
Can you not just make them go louder?
Nope.
Okay, and then the other thing is at that town hall meeting, it was committed that all of the questions that were submitted and asked would be put somewhere up on a website, and I'm wondering how that is progressing, if it has progressing, and how you're going to let us know.
Sure. So the microphone, I'll just do my best to speak louder and clearer.
Thank you.
And the questions from the town hall, we're still working on that. That was a suggestion that, the question was asked of council, if staff could do that. I did just a review. It's hard because they're political answers for the most part to most of the questions, not staff answers. So we're just looking at how we might submit that either within the minutes or as part of those or some other pieces. But if there's anything that wasn't, that I would just suggest if there's questions that you had that weren't asked and answered in that meeting, by all means, just reach out and we'll do our best. We'll always answer those questions offline anyway.
That's fine, thank you. The last question is that I keep asking for proper crosswalks into Windsor Park, especially with the new, the big new thing. I would like a commitment that we're going to have proper crosswalks at least 4 entrances into the park, where the new house is, where a lot of people are entering the park at that area, at the main entrance where the pavilion is on both sides, and I think over where the bus people come in. So I think you need better safety, and without the park being available to the kids, there's a lot of kids on the sidewalks, holding onto a rope, 10 at a time with just maybe 2 adults, and I think I would like a commitment that we would have proper crosswalks with, I don't know if I want speed bumps because we have people cycling around, but at least a way that somebody coming knows that they have to stop. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. And I can't commit to crosswalks. They are essentially delegated to staff to do assessments.
I've been asking for years.
But if you want that, I will just say this as a general thing, anything to do with traffic or things of that nature, if you send a request into engineering, staff will do an assessment on them. We don't tend to do council-driven pieces. Anybody else? Please come forward.
I'm Daniela Fisher, and I'm with Oak Bay. So a few years ago, at a sustainability conference in Vienna, I was struck not by the stunning red house or the music that followed, by Mayor Hoppel's comments on city planning. He challenged us to pick an address and try to decipher the financial profile of its residents. He then explained how Vienna was intentionally designed to integrate people seamlessly into established neighborhoods, fostering cohesion across ethnic, social, and economic backgrounds. This thoughtful approach has resulted in one of the highest qualities of life in Europe, ensuring access to school, services, and amenities to all. Vienna thrives because of the deliberate and ongoing city planning efforts that prioritize livability. A critical component of its success is that good city planning is never done in isolation. It is shaped in consultation with those that live and own property in the area. Contrast this with the ghost cities of China, where buildings stand empty. The stark reality underscores a fundamental truth. Cities are not just made of buildings, they are made of people. However, the building environment has immense power. It can either foster social connection or create friction, leading to an unwelcome environment. Oak Bay's official community plan reflects careful planning and residents' input, yet provincial pressures now push for rushed decisions that disregard this vision and the future of our community. When faced with proposals that override the OCP in addition to the infill mandate, I urge you to consider whether they truly support a sustainable, thriving Oak Bay, or create division and animosity due to the lack of planning. The OCP, like any other guiding document, needs updates from time to time. However, bypassing the voices of those who live and invest in this community dismisses Oak Bay's greatest asset, its engaged residents who want to see it thrive. Change isn't easy. But what I see is not resistance to development, but to unplanned development with projects that disregard the character of the community and fail to support a healthy future, like the drastic East Down project requesting an entirely new zoning category unprecedented to Oak Bay or even to Victoria. The sheer number of variances required to accommodate such oversized building on a small residential lot is concerning. I have a dream, one of a thriving Oak Bay, one that embraces sustainable development, strengthens community ties, and enhances our shared future. I sincerely hope that the team sitting around this table will be the one to honor good planning efforts and bring this dream to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. And I certainly just want to reiterate, we have on our agenda tonight a engagement plan for the OCP planning, which is looking at multifamily. And so I certainly encourage everybody to participate fully in that process. If anybody else wishes to come forward, please do so now. If you're online, you can raise your hand. But the other part of that is I think it's important to understand some of the constraints that we have. Development that is compliant with the OCP, we can't have public hearings on anymore. But items that are not compliant, we do have public hearings, and we still welcome people to write letters to us and raise issues even if in those situations, because we do want to make good decisions. So thank you. Don't see anybody else coming forward for the public participation period. Call last time. Okay, we'll then move on to the agenda. First item on the agenda is, I think, probably one that many people are here Sorry, my apologies. I had the microphone off. First item on this next section, section of 6. This is the Heritage Revitalization Agreement, HRA 00011, and OCP Amendment for 1558 Beach Drive. Mr. McStravick, I believe you're providing a brief overview of this.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just wait for it to appear on the screen. Very good. Okay. Good evening, Your Worship. Agreements and official community plan amendment application for 1558 Beach Drive, as you mentioned. The application was opened on the 9th of May, 2023. I would like to give a presentation to provide an overview of the proposal at a high level and a summary of some of the changes that have been made to the application since it was last presented to Council. Next slide, please. So you can just let all that text come out if you want there. Thank you. So the applicant has submitted an application for an HRA and OCP amendment for 1558 Beach Drive. They wish to revitalize the J.W. Morris House, including by making significant code and life safety improvements to the structure to remedy some previous alterations and generally preserve the building to ensure its survival into the future. More details about the specific revitalization measures are included in the staff report, which Council has. Along with this revitalization of the Morris House, the applicants proposed to increase the number of rental units in it from 7 to 10 and to create 3 additional lots by subdivision. This development work would be authorized by the requested HRA. Lastly, the applicants request to amend the official community plan to change the land use designation of the subject property from established neighborhoods to multi-unit residential to reflect the long-standing use of the J.W. Morris House as a residential apartment building. This OCP amendment, if approved, would apply only to the land containing the Morris House and not to the newly created single-family lots. Next slide, please. This slide just gives an overview of the property location, highlighted in blue, between Prospect Place and Beach Drive, approximately 1 block south of Glenline Norfolk School. The site currently contains, as I mentioned, a 7-unit residential apartment building. Next slide, please. This slide shows the official community plan land use designation of established neighborhoods. Next slide, please. On the left, we can see the extent of the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area that the subject property is in, and the R5 residential use zoning of the property is illustrated on the right. Next slide, please. This is the current site plan. We can see the J.W. Morris House on the left and an existing detached garage up to the north. Next slide, please. This shows the proposed subdivision and layout for the new buildings conceived by the HRA application. You'll see to the north, proposed lot A contains the existing detached garage, which would be converted into a single-family house. Lot B to the south contains the J.W. Morris house again, and lots C and D on the east side would contain single-family houses with secondary suites. Next slide, please. This slide just gives an overview of the policy context. We're mostly concerned with the official community plan and the zoning bylaw, as well as the special circumstance of being within the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area. Next slide, please. So, as a refresher, Council last reviewed this application on the 11th of December 2023, at which time Council requested that the applicant that the application come back once the following matters had been addressed. Council sought amended designs, specifically for the 2 single-family houses, a proposal for rent protection for the existing tenants, consideration of heritage designation for interior features, and a land lift analysis to inform a discussion around unit affordability and or other community amenities. So over the next few slides, I will just show how the applicant has responded to these points. Next slide, please. First, the updated house designs. The designs for the 2 new houses that had been put forward for the proposed lots C and D were not well received by Council. The relatively boxy and modern approach taken for these units was viewed as out of step with the intent of the Prospect HCA guidelines, which call for new buildings to be in a complementary style, respectful of the neighborhood's heritage assets. Next slide, please. In response, the applicant has presented revised designs for these 2 lots, which are now in a more traditional style, which echoes the architecture of nearby homes and is more in keeping with the intent of the HCA guidelines. The houses are now proposed to include secondary suites as well. Next slide, please. This is a 3D rendering of the proposed houses from the sort of an elevated perspective on the Beach Drive frontage, and you can see the revitalized J. Moore's house to the rear as well. Next slide, please. These homes would be accessed by a shared central driveway as seen on this excerpt from the landscape plan. And I will note as well that the applicant has retained an AIBC architect, Marco Simchik, who is attending virtually tonight, as the project architect to lead the design of the J.W. Morris house work, which requires such a professional due to its size. Next slide, please. This slide just summarizes the tenant assistance plan that was received from the applicants. All tenants were made aware of the owner's intent to significantly renovate the building, which would require the building to be vacated from the time that their tenancies began. And the owners proposed to double the required rent compensation payment to existing tenants, as well as provide a right of first refusal to occupy the newly revitalized J.W. Morris house upon its completion. Next slide, please. With respect to Council's direction that the applicants should explore interior building features which could be granted a heritage designation, Dr. Katie Kummer submitted a letter on this topic, which noted that the applicants will be able to designate the interior public spaces in the building, meaning the front entranceway, the hall, and the staircases, all of which are in relatively good original condition. However, the interiors of the residential units were not found to be supportable for designation due to their heavily altered state and further alterations which will be required to carry out the proposed renovations to the building. The applicants have said, though, that they will salvage and reuse what elements they can from those suites regardless. Next slide, please. The district retains a third-party economic analyst at the applicant's expense to conduct a land lift analysis as requested by Council. The conclusion of this report was that due to the underlying development potential of the site by right and the significant costs associated with revitalizing the J.W. Morris house, the project cannot support a community amenity contribution, including below market housing. The consultant did note, as staff also note in the report, that the revitalization of the J.W. Morris house itself, of course, represents a community amenity. Next slide, please. The the application was reviewed in its original state, not the revised state, by the Oak Bay Heritage Commission on the 3rd of October, 2023. And that commission recommended that Council reject the application in its previous state. As Council's resolution of December 11th, 2023 instructed staff to bring the application back to Council once the requested changes were made, the application has not been referred back to the Heritage Commission for an updated recommendation. Next slide, please. So overall, staff find that the application is supportable given the changes that have been made to the application since it was last viewed by Council. For the reasons listed here, it's supportive of many of the district's policies and objectives. And next slide, please. Staff are recommending that Council proceed with the application by the actions shown here and as described in the staff report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McStravick. We do have the applicants here with us in the room, so perhaps invite them forward. I'm sure there'll be some questions. And is there a second presentation? No. Sorry, Mr. McStravick.
That's right. The applicants have a presentation to give if there's
they do.
time.
Okay.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Thank you. So good evening, Oak Bay Mayor and Council members. My Rebecca Miller, along with our coordinating professional, architect Marco Simsik of Simsik Architecture, Katie Kummer of Kummer Heritage Consulting, and Mark Holland of West Plan Consulting. So we are here with you this evening to reintroduce the Heritage Revitalization Agreement, or HRA project, for the J.W. Morris House at 1558 Beach Drive in the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area. It has been a while since the project was before you, and we would like to describe the design changes which have occurred since that time. So overall, the proposal includes improvements and rehabilitation for the manor itself on Lot B, the conversion of the existing carriage house to a detached dwelling on Lot A, and 2 proposed new homes, each with a secondary suite on Lot C and D. The manor is not currently designated heritage, nor on the Heritage Registry, but the heritage designation is the main pillar of our HRA proposal. The net gain of official housing units proposed by this HRA is 9. 4 additional units in the manor, because one of the existing units is unauthorized, and that's, if you're wondering why it says 7, there's 7, but technically 6 are legal. 1 in the converted coach house, and 4 in the homes of at the front of the property, for a total of 15 dwelling units. So that's a 150% increase from the existing legitimate 6 units. All of the manor units will remain as rentals in perpetuity. New ownership and tenancy options will include the possibility for intergenerational living in the homes fronting Beach Drive. We have integrated elevations in the Lot C and D homes for elevators, not elevations, for age in place living. The HRA concept for this property balances preserving heritage and supporting the objectives of the Oak Bay Official Community Plan and provincial mandates to establish more and diverse housing options for this area. The J.W. Morris House, originally built around 1910, was remodeled in about 1949, and those alterations changed the building, undermining its Tudor Revival design integrity. We are striving to implement several adjustments which will better incorporate those mid-century modifications to be more consistent with the Tudor Revival design conventions. For example, you can see the beautifully balanced design in this original photo on the left, which was offset in the later renovations by such things as you can see in the photo from 1976. Like the changes to extend the deck and misalign the balustrades. I don't know if you can make that out, but the photograph on the on the left at the top shows the square sections of the balustrade aligning with the pilasters below. But if you look at the next photograph, you see they're all pushed off to the right, and they don't balance properly with the actual house. So this unbalanced, there's also this hip roof that was added at the top, and they took out the gable. There's 2, like a hip and a gable roof that were removed from the house. So among many other items, especially changes to windows, we plan to improve the look of this building. And thanks to Katie for sourcing these photos. It was a real mishmash of design elements that are on that house today. So here are our proposed before and after drawings of the east elevation. We propose to remove the large hipped roof addition and incorporate gables and a shed roof to restore balance to the roof design. We will rectify the alignment of the balustrade and reestablish appropriate window styles, locations, and rhythm on all elevations of the manor. Updates to the building structure, insulation, mechanical and electrical systems of the existing building will be part of the revitalization project, as well as new and upgraded services, infrastructure, including the storm, water, and sewer lines. As in our 2023 version of the proposal, the number of rental units proposed in the manor is 10. It will be renovated from its current 6 units. We have introduced an elevator to the manor in direct response to feedback and inquiries from public consultation at the open house that was held on April 2023, almost 2 years ago. And since that meeting, there is already serious interest in the rental units. In addition, we have revised the exterior color schemes of the revitalized manor, as you can see in the following renderings, comparing the previous proposal to the current. The lighter color palette will accentuate the heritage trim and detailing, still utilizing heritage color accents, but harmonizing more eloquently with the existing cobblestone foundation. This shift will allow the house to integrate into its setting, yet elevate its visibility from the road against the backdrop of the slope of the hill behind it, the tree canopies, and surrounding rooftops. On Lot A, we are taking the original carriage house, now used as a garage, and proposing an addition to the building to create a detached dwelling informed by the heritage design elements of the existing garage. All of the garage and its heritage detailing such as knee brackets, dentals, divided windows, shingles, and finials will be retained. The design remains the same as what was proposed in 2023, and the color scheme is complementary to the manor. The Lot A concept includes private yard and patio spaces, and vehicular access will be via Prospect Place, the same as now. For Lot C and D, at the Beach Drive frontage on the property, we have originally proposed contemporary houses with flat roofs, as you can see in this rendering from 2023. We have significantly modified C and D since then, entirely removing or reworking the designs in response to public feedback and comments from Oak Bay Council. We are now proposing homes with traditional form, character, and massing, with designs sympathetic to the heritage manor and much of the traditional residential fabric of the neighborhood. They will fit well within the established rhythm of the streetscape in terms of massing and setbacks. The northern home, Lot C, epitomizes the timeless elegance and traditional style and architectural details, including a combination of shingles on the lower level with traditional mullion windows, boxed oak gables with corbels, gable vent details, and natural stone accents. The southern residence on Lot D has period rock-dash stucco finishes, an asymmetrical curved bell-cast roofline, knee brackets, exposed rafter tail detailing, and again, natural stone accents. The stone on both homes will be in context with the existing stonework on the heritage manor. Here is an excerpt from the landscape plans done by MDI Landscape Architects Inc. The grounds of the J.W. Morris House are currently somewhat overgrown, but will be much improved during the rehabilitation of the property. Since our last presentation to you, we've added bicycle parking, which you can see in the lower left corner of the slide, adjacent to a small garden area under a tree canopy. Many amenity spaces have been designed on the properties, including trellises, arbors, patios, landscape screens, pergolas, water features, and garden rooms, with planting palettes and details inspired by the heritage manor. Plantings will include shade and drought-tolerant, deer-resistant, West Coast native perennials, pollinator-friendly, and food-bearing species, following Oak Bay's design guidelines for landscape. This HRA proposal offers a balance of sensitive infill development with a revitalization proposal that will rejuvenate the manor to secure the presence of this historically important building for many decades and generations to come. With these changes, we're bringing back some of the character that the J.W. Morris House lost in the mid-20th century. The proposed new homes at the Beach Drive frontage flank the entry to the property, framing the view corridor to the J.W. Morris House. The revised designs with pitched roofs will allow enhanced advantages of the manor from Beach Drive compared to the initial flat-roofed homes. The proposed new detached homes will fit well with the residential fabric of the Heritage Conservation Area neighborhood and the established multi-use of the heritage building of the manor will be augmented. As mentioned earlier, there is already serious interest in the additional rental prospects, and the project is well supported by the community. We have worked closely with Oak Bay planning staff over the past 2 years to fine-tune this application to what you are considering tonight. And this team of talented professionals have all contributed top-notch knowledge, ideas, research, and skills to the project. We've responded to council and community requests and feel that this is a fantastic opportunity for Oak Bay to use the tools of the HRA to not only leverage heritage conservation goals, but also address the housing needs at the same time. Through this HRA, the J.W. Morris House will be designated heritage, and the future income from the rentals will help to finance maintenance and upkeep of the building for the foreseeable future. We really need additional rentals in Oak Bay, and I truly think that this is a great proposal with many diverse and mutual benefits for the municipality, the public, and the owners alike. We would very much appreciate your support to move this project forward. Thank you for your time, and we welcome any comments or questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. I will come back to this table for questions, and this time not subject to public input. This will, if council wishes to see any amendments, we can make those recommendations. If council's comfortable of sending it forward, staff would draft the necessary pieces, and then it would go through a proper formal public hearing process to get public feedback on it. So just want to make sure I'm correct on that, just so that we're all, yes, so thank you. So at this point, we're just trying to determine if this has merit to move forward, and looking to members of council for questions. If I might just bring up, well, I can see on my own screen, it's okay, but it might be worthwhile to bring back up the speakers on the screen so that we can go ahead, Councillor Green, to start.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the presentations and explanations of the project. And through you to Mr. Stranick, just a question, and that is, you mentioned that this new design proposal did not go back to the Heritage Commission for review, and I just wondered if you could explain that, please. Thank you.
Mr. McStravick?
Thank you, through your worship. The resolution that council passed on December 11th, 2023 was to bring this back to council once the items council noted in that resolution were addressed, and there wasn't direction to take it to the Heritage Commission again before bringing it back to council. So it would be possible, of course, to refer it back to the Heritage Commission now if council wished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. First of all, thank you to Mr. Collins for again presenting this. What we are seeing tonight, of course, is amended from the last version, incorporating changes that council asked for. It does outline in the staff report that the HRA is a necessary step in subdivision approval, but there's no guarantees of that, of course. And what I would like to know is, this is an amended version, so if this was moved forward to be approved, would further modifications be allowed as part of that process by the developer without any further approval or review by council?
Sure, thank you. Mr. McStravick?
A heritage revitalization agreement bylaw would be drafted by staff and the applicants to match this precise proposal with this set of bylaw variations. For example, the height and the floor area ratio, the setbacks that they're proposing, those would all be sort of baked into the bylaw. And so it would become pretty tough to make any adjustments to the project after council approved it, if council chose to do so. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to probably the applicant. Just a question about the bike parking. I was appreciate seeing that, and I just wondered, is there actually secure or covered bike parking for the residents being provided, or is it just outdoor sort of temporary guest bike parking? Thank you.
Collins?
I believe we've provided storage for everybody in the Heritage Building in the basement, so there'll be room for them to store bikes inside.
Anything else? No? Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Braithwaite?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I have a few questions. I think this one goes to staff, and I was looking at figure 4.1, which I believe is on page 5 of the staff report, and it says land use framework provisions basically say that Oak Bay, the low-rise buildings are defined as Oak Bay as being up to 3 stories high. Mid-rise buildings are defined as being 4 to 6 stories high. But then on the chart it says on page 5, 3 to 8 stories. Is it 8 stories or 6 stories? Because I got really confused with that.
I'll give that. I'll let staff refer to their report.
Thank you, through your worship. I acknowledge that this table has some, what appear to be some contradictions in it. It's a little bit tough to interpret sometimes. And so we have it here exactly as it appears in the official community plan. This table in the OCP uses the term current a few times, and our interpretation is that those pieces are meant to reflect what currently exists in those areas in the OCP. Other parts of the table are meant to be more forward-looking, but where it says current, that means what's currently there. And as you, I think, pointed out, that sort of footnote at the bottom of the table, it mentions that mid-rise buildings are defined as being 4 to 6 stories high. And so in our forward-looking interpretations of the table, we look at mid-rise as being 4 to 6 stories high. Hopefully that helps. Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you so much. And then I guess my other question is that I did hear your answer to the question that was just asked in regards to what has to go there, the proponent has to follow the plans that are being presented today. If something happened to those houses that were being built, then what would they be able to rebuild, I guess, under the current legislation, under Bill 44? Would they then be able to rebuild a fourplex if one of those houses burnt down?
Mr. Stravik?
Thank you, through your worship. The HRA bylaws that we have recently brought to council, for example, for Transit Road 1318, have included language addressing that question, where it would say something to the effect that for a certain period of time after adoption of the HRA, the only land use that is permitted on those lots is what is described in the HRA. In the Transit Road example, we chose a 25-year timeline, and so after year 26, if it burnt down, then they could build whatever was permitted in the zoning bylaw of 2050 or whatever it happened to be. So that was just a timeline that we thought was appropriate, and it could be set as something more or less as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think my next question is for Mr. Collins. Thank you for the presentation. I was looking with interest to the gate that's fronting Beach Drive. And I was wondering if that gate is actually part of will that actually be there? So it will have to open and close every time somebody drives onto that, onto the lot?
Yeah, I believe that's the intention, yes.
Around that, I'm looking at the parking, and now it looks like the parking for the 2 new buildings is a garage which is to the side, which I think is a really good design for 2 cars. But what about for where the tenants would park?
I believe the parking for tenants would have to be on the street, because we're only providing, there's nowhere for anyone to park in the driveway because we need access to get into those garages, so there's no parking on the driveway.
Thank you. And so that was actually leads into my next question, which I looked at the width of the driveway and I thought, is there room, will somebody actually just park on the driveway and not go into the garage? Or is there room for them to have to, is there room for them to do that? Or do they actually have to go into the garage? Because that's one of the selling features that's mentioned in the report, is that the view from the street would be unencumbered by cars.
Yeah. In order for, if you look at the way that's designed, we call the distance between the 2 garage doors a drive aisle, and you need that entire drive aisle to make a turn into the garage, both directions, so nobody can park on the driveway. It would block people from getting access to their garage.
Okay, that's really good, thank you. And then my other question that also has to do with the driveway, which is, it talks about having that driveway so that the view for the house is there. But when I look at the view for the house, the parking for the house actually has 2 parking spots in front of the house, which you should be able to see from the driveway. So, do you see what I mean? When you're looking at the actual Morris house, so it's not that picture. If you go to the layout of the, yeah, that one. So if you see where the 2 cars are parked for the Morris house.
Yes.
And then you'll see where the driveway is from Beach Drive, you can actually see right up that driveway. Obviously, it looks like there's a kind of a trellis there, but I would imagine that you would still be able to see, in the beginning, you'd still be able to see those cars parked right in front of the house there. That would limit the view, I think, of the house going up the driveway. So it would be right in, do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I think I would like to, like, maybe at our next meeting, hopefully if this moves forward tonight, we'll do a cross-section through there, because that area where those 2 cars are parked is quite a bit higher than the lower area where the driveways are. So I think it's going to be hard standing down on Beach Drive to actually see those cars. And we probably, like, I believe there'll be screening in front of it too, like plantings to kind of block the, so you're not looking at cars from down there.
Yeah, I think because I think that we're looking at it in the elevated way right now.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
exactly.
And then I do have another question in regards to, on page 73 of the report, and when I look at, I see the secondary suite for Lot C, but on Lot D, on the plans on the house on that page, it doesn't look like there's a secondary suite. I know there has to be one because I saw it later on in the report, but on page 73, there's no secondary suite listed in Lot D.
There's supposed to be one in each suite, in each house, so I don't have the floor plans with me tonight. I can't confirm that, but they definitely are supposed to have suites in both of them.
And then I'm going to just continue on with my questions, thanks. And then in the report, it says that there's no experiential impacts on Beach or Prospect for cars currently coming in, going on the street, but right now, the cars for the house come in on the Beach Drive side. Is that correct? I'm not quite sure, but if not, if it is, then when this gets changed, then all of the cars for the Morris house will come in from the Prospect side, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
So
I'm not sure if they come in on Beach Drive. They can, but it seems to me when I've been there, most of them seem to come from Prospect.
Okay. Okay. So Prospect and go down
Yeah.
through the. Okay. Thank you. And then on page 80, there's an interesting line that says the stone walls will be preserved and restored, and the rhythm of, and then it just cuts off, and I wasn't sure what the rhythm of was supposed to be. So, and I know you don't have the report in front of you, so that's going to be hard for you to answer, but it does, it's on page 80, if you have the report up there. No? Oh, there you go. Somebody's bringing you page 80.
That's from our submission?
I'm just interested to know what the rhythm will be. I'm sure it's not that important, but
Sure, everybody enjoys looking at documents you wrote a year and a half ago. I'm trying to remember what could have got cut off.
page,
We'll let them look at that. Why don't you
yeah.
continue, Councillor?
And then I do have on another page, I have a question. There's some numbers I think that are in the incorrect place on page 150. It talks about the uncovered parking spots and the percentage of lot coverage, et cetera. And I think the lines have been shifted in your document, so that might need a correction on there as well. And then, I think I had one last question. I can't find it right now, so I'll pass it on to someone else to ask their questions. Thank
I'm
you.
happy to come back to you in a bit. Are there other questions from members of council for the applicant or staff? Just looking online, I don't see a hand raised with Councillor Appleton. I just have a couple of questions that are more heritage oriented, but first perhaps to Mr. Collins. I appreciate you've done a lot of the work on the revamping of the building. and there's been some comments made, and they're true, which is that this is, so we're not really restoring the G.W. Morris house. It's really a new renovation of the house to get to sort of a new design. Can you maybe just touch on sort of the rationale for looking at this more from just a subsequent renovation as opposed to more of a restoration model of approach to what you were considering here?
I would say that it's because the square footage that was done back in the mid-century was added to the house, so it's kind of hard to remove it now when we're trying to increase the amount of units there. So we're trying to say, well, how do we maintain that square footage but make it look more appropriate to the design that was original? Because it really, you know, we've actually had a view of the house from the up above, flying over it, trying to figure out the roof line, because it's incredibly complicated and very strange what they did to it. So we're just trying to not mimic what was done before, but bring back some of that design, but it's not going to be exactly as it was. It's just we're trying to make the best of what we think was a bad renovation.
Okay, thank you. And do you have a sense of, like, when you say you've done that work, have you looked at the sort of the structural work that's in the building right now, and its ability to support returning back to the original design?
Yeah, we feel that's very doable. Yeah, structurally.
To your design, but is it doable or practical to go back to the original?
Well, then we'd excuse me, we'd start losing a lot of square footage that exists now.
Can you give us a sense of how much square footage would be lost? I appreciate
And
you
I'm
probably
just
have-
like totally guessing, but I would say probably, you know, close to 700 or 800 square feet.
Okay.
So probably at least a good 1 or 2 units would be lost if we took it back.
Okay. Thank you. And then the other question is really sort of from a heritage perspective. I'm not sure if the hair consultant is in the room here. Oh, there we are. Thank you. You may want to come forward. I just have a couple of questions. Just yeah, welcome. Thank you. And yes, you're Katie Cummer, is that correct? Okay, great. Thank you. And welcome, Ms. Cummer. Oh, yep, so the microphone on. When you're speaking, you don't have to keep it on when you're not. So my questions are just, as you know, this is obviously within a heritage conservation area. We always, fairly new area for us in Oak Bay, and it's got some very clear guidelines in terms of some of the aspirational aspects of it, and we're always trying to maximize those as much as possible. So I think the largest sort of concerns I would have from this, from a heritage perspective, are we've already touched on sort of the rationale for the design of the primary building, and let's leave that alone. But can you just speak a little bit to the view corridor? Because one of the key things in those design guidelines is making an effort to maintain view corridors to the significant buildings in the area. So that's one question. The other question is more straightforward, and that's just, how are you managing the existing rock wall? And I see there's still a rock wall there, but the changes that are being done to it, how much of that is being left intact with opening changes, or is it being sort of taken down completely and rebuilt to meet the needs?
Thank you, Your Worship, for your questions, and thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. I guess so. I know you have 3 questions, one in terms of the roof line, the view corridor, and the rock wall. Can you hear me okay? Sorry. Just to quickly jump on the roof line comment, if I may, in terms of the restoration. There is one issue in the sense that we only have one view of the roof line from the north. We don't know what it looked like historically. So we know the one from the Beach Drive side for sure, but obviously there are the complications that Russ mentioned. But actually that north side, we don't fully know exactly what it looked like. So we're trying our best to bring it back to what we can guess from this one photograph that I was able to find that's kind of a skewed view. And then also just trying to make it look a little bit more cohesive, because I'm not sure, some of you came to look at the site, but what it currently looks like on the north side is quite strange. It's not appropriate for the building in its current state. So that's the roof line, but enough of that. The view corridor. One of the things that currently, again, if you go and stand in Beach Drive right now, is the view up to the building is actually the funny changes that they've made. So the logic and why I was willing to support this sort of shifting over, is the view corridor that you then end up having is of the actual Tudor Revival kind of decorative detailing in the middle of what actually is the more intact part of the building, rather than this part that's been changed. Because basically what you look at now is this area that's been changed so much, as Russ pointed out to. So that was sort of the logic in being able that when you're standing on Beach Drive, you will then have a clearer view of then what you see currently. Because right now it's quite overgrown, it's off to the side, you don't actually see as much as you really would like to. And then of course it's getting to be able to see it in all its glory from the Prospect Place side, in fact. Which the drawing at the very beginning of the presentation, the drawing by James and James, actually shows it from the Prospect Place side, where it kind of shows that really it's an interesting structure in the sense that it does have the dual access, and it actually switches in the historic record. Sometimes it's listed as a Beach Drive property, sometimes it's listed as a Prospect Place property. So I think it's really kind of just rethinking about it as more as the Prospect Place side, and so really trying to have that side really shine, the side that is more intact, that has the stained glass windows, etc. So that's view corridors. Last but not least, the rock wall. Yes, so the plan with the rock wall, again, if you go down on both Beach Drive and on Prospect Place, these rock walls have definitely seen better days. On the Prospect Place side, part of it has actually been put over with concrete. We've lost part of it. So the idea is being able to try and bring the wall back, but obviously there will be some changes that take place on the Beach Drive side in terms of shifting over. Prior to any of that being done, as far as best practice, obviously thorough documentation prior and in process and afterwards, so that we know what was done. We fully understand the positioning of the wall and the various rocks in what place that they are. On the Beach Drive side, part of it has already been altered. My apologies if my answer's too long, sorry. When the property was subdivided in the 1990s, part of the original rock wall is now with the neighboring properties. So there has already been some change and loss of that original wall. But yes, ultimately the hope is proper documentation so that for the work being done, it can be brought back to as close as possible as we can. But obviously we will be shifting over the entranceway to make sure we have that hero shot of the restored building. Whew, sufficient? Apologies.
That was a fairly comprehensive answer, and I appreciate. So I guess the other question I would have on that, and the view that's there right now is, it's hard because of course it's an elevated view. So and in fair, I understand why you would do that. It gives you a sense of what that would, as you're walking through what you might be able to see. But can you just perhaps share with us, from your perspective, from a heritage perspective, there are heritage conservation area guidelines here to do as best as possible to preserve sightlines.
Absolutely.
And so, are there aspects here that could, like I was looking at the top-down site plan and just wondering, are there other areas like just even tilting the buildings aside a little bit so there's more of an oblique, more sort of angled look at the house? Are there other things that we might look at here that might, better facilitate, sort of the maximization of the view of the house, even if there's two buildings there, which would obviously obscure the view quite a lot?
I'm afraid as far as the design side, I can't really speak so much to it, but I can.
Can you just speak to, sorry, maybe it's just fair to say, can you just speak to, I think we're asked here to, the Heritage Conservation Guidelines say maximize view corridors. We have an application that, takes away some of that view corridor. So perhaps from a heritage consulting perspective, just maybe your rationale and explanation for where you see that balance.
For sure, and obviously I really have tried my best to balance all aspects of this in terms of the modern needs and requirements with the guidelines, with best practice, but also recognizing the constraints and challenges of the site in general. I think from my perspective, again, because of so much of what is visible right now from the Beach Drive side is not the hero shot that it was historically, right? This is what you could see historically, and unfortunately that isn't what you can see now. And so I think instead the emphasis was, okay, well, we're able to reveal so much more of the other side of the building that again is entirely hidden right now by landscaping, et cetera, and by all the parked cars. Again, I'm not sure how much time you spend down on Prospect Ave, or Prospect Place, sorry. But you can't really see or appreciate the building in its current form, certainly from that side. And so I think sort of the logic was that here is an opportunity to revitalize the building. That was actually one thing I did want to just jump on in terms of your comment about this as a restoration. The truth is, no, it's a revitalization, right? It's a heritage revitalization agreement. It really is about giving this place a new lease of life in its new form, basically. So continuing with what it is in terms of multi-unit, but allowing us to kind of expand on that. But yeah, and I think, so in terms of how I rationalize it was in terms of what's happening on the other side of the building. Again, you will still be able to see as I said, that kind of hero Tudor revival part of it. But I recognize in terms of what is needed and what is hoping to be achieved. But I recognize it's not easy. It's hard to balance all of this. I'm doing the best I can. I hope that answers your question. My apologies.
It does, and I have one other question for Mr.
For sure.
Collins at that
Oh,
point.
okay.
Sorry.
Thank you for your time.
No, thank you. I'm trying to make sure we get all the questions asked and answered so we can make a determination of whether or not this should move forward for public input and so forth. Mr. Collins, just looking at the top-down view of the site plan, and in relation to the question asked earlier about parking, was there contemplation of, moving things slightly forward of the front two houses in a way that would allow for that little back piece of the property to be sort of 2 additional parking spots, nose in, past the entranceway to the garages? I'm just curious, just to provide some additional off-street parking for those 2 homes.
I guess we felt it was just getting a bit too tight. We didn't want to keep pushing towards Beach Drive, so we kind of had to pick a spot and say, okay, this is close enough. And I think it was that question that Councillor Braithwaite asked about that part that was missing. That was to do with saying that the houses kind of fit with the houses to the south. They kind of match. The setbacks are very similar. If you go down there and have a look, the size of them and the distance from the Beach Drive back is about the same as what these are going to be. And so we just tried to keep that kind of rhythm going along the front.
Yeah, thank you. All of my questions, so good time to hand it back to Sorry, any other first-time questions? Don't see right here, so go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, for a second time.
Thank you. It was actually, I found the question I wanted to ask, and it was in regards to the variances. I noticed there is a chart in the staff report about variances. It's quite extensive, and understanding that the Morris house would have pre-existing things that had happened to it that would predate our current zoning bylaws. But looking at the other houses, there's a large number of variances that are being asked for. And in particular, I look at the floor area ratio, which is 0.4 for dwellings in an RS5, and those 3 are asking for 0.72, 0.74, and 0.62, and then also lot coverage, it's 30%, and they're asking for 31.2, 34.4, and 34%, for example. But do we know exactly how many variances? I didn't want to count them up, but do we know off the top of our heads how many variances are being asked for these properties?
Mr. McStravick?
Through your worship, I haven't counted the number, I'm sorry.
I think in fairness, it may be worth asking the applicant the rationale for those variances on those three buildings.
So because we're working with smaller than usual lots, but we're still trying to make a reasonable, decent home for like a single family 3-bedroom home with a suite, it's just what we end up left with. Just like when we decided not to push any further back on the property, it's the same thing with, like, we kind of had a balance. This is where we have to go for maximum floor area. This is where we have to go for site coverage. And we thought they were reasonable considering, in the end, what we're going to end up with on the property. So we just proposed what we thought worked.
I think, I'm going by memory, but are there relaxations for the side yard setbacks on the exterior of the 2 front houses?
I don't think so. I don't think
I
we're
don't
asking
think
for
there are either,
setback
but I just wanna make
relaxations
sure.
on the sides, no.
Mr. McStravick, just
That's correct. Lots C and D don't, they're not requesting any side setback variances. Sorry, to correct myself, the second story side setback for the house on lot C is they're requesting to vary it down to 2.13 from 3 meters for the second story.
Right, thank you. All right, I don't see other hands here. Oh, sorry, Councillor Patterson, my apologies.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And through you, I think this question is for staff. Page 12 of the staff report does say the development proposal includes off-site public realm improvements to both the Prospect Place and Beach Drive frontages that will be secured through a 219 covenant. I'm just wondering if staff will speak briefly to what the scope of that would be.
Mr. Mistravik?
Thank you, through your worship. I can speak to that very briefly. Actually, if we can keep this slide up right now, we can see to the east of the subject property, the Beach Drive frontage has quite a wide apron right now. It's currently just all gravel and quite disorganized. The engineering department has requested that through this redevelopment, we could take the opportunity to sort of tidy that up and bring it to more of a standard configuration. It would remain wide though. Similarly, on the Prospect Place side, basically the frontage is sort of overgrown and in different depths and levels of completeness, and so we would just take the opportunity to tidy that up and bring it to a more standard approach. Yeah, we haven't gone ahead and had detailed designs done for the public realm, but it's that type of thing that we're talking about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mistravik. Anything else, Councillor Patterson? I have Councillor Braithwaite, you had a...
Sorry, just from that, currently in that area, there's cars park on that area right now. So is that what your staff is envisioning? Is that it would be made to a standard so perhaps cars would be able to park there, and like specifically from the suites that are being proposed for those houses, or more of a sidewalk?
Thank you.
Mistravik?
Sorry, through your worship. There's no plan to put a sidewalk. The sidewalk is on the other side of the road, and the engineering department doesn't have it in their plans to bring a sidewalk on both sides. So today it is sort of unorganized street parking, and it would remain pretty much in that way. The tenants for the suites would be free to use it, just as any other member of the public would be free to use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see other questions from members of council, so I can start you off easy. I need a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded. There's you debate that. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Pleased to move the following 4 staff recommendations. I think they're a comprehensive package that need to go together as one, but I'm happy. How would you like to do that? Have them read out individually to get seconders for each motion, or how would you like to proceed?
I'm probably most comfortable that we just move them all together. This is not a decision-making point. It's sending it to staff for direction for next steps. I'm happy if people wish to have them separated. I'll separate them and call them separately. So, but you can move them all together.
And would you like them read? Okay, I would like to move the 4 staff recommendations that follow the recommendation for receipt. Thank you.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Thank you. So this would essentially move us to for the OCP plan reviews, staff to develop an HRA, drafted heritage designation bylaw, and a housing agreement as laid out. Yeah. Thank you. Please go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, and I would just like to motivate to support that motion. I think that what we have before us tonight is a very significant and thoughtful evolution from the original submission, which has responded to all of Council's requests, and the staff report clearly shows that, and the staff presentation. So thank you, Mr. McStravick. I am very heartened to see it back, and thankful that the owner has the interest and resources to take on a project of this scope. I do recognize the passion of many in the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area and beyond in the community who would really just like to see that only the J.W. Morris House be restored, which is to the highest level of conservation treatment described in the national standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada. However, as the independent financial analysis shows, this is not possible without an investor who would accept negative return for their efforts to rehab the building substantially and add 4 legal units. I'm very pleased to support the staff recommendations, which will take us to the next step to save core elements of the beautiful original building on a long-term basis as rental units, to add ownership housing in the community, and 2 secondary suites. And I also wanted to add that I think the landscape plan, which has come before us, is a very thoughtful approach with multiple passive recreation facilities and features. So I am really fully in support of what's being presented to us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Others wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks so much, and thanks for your comments, Councillor Watson. I think I would probably feel more comfortable if this went back, was referred back to Heritage, just for another look. I think what Councillor Watson said, there have been some great changes made to this proposal. I'm especially pleased to see the removal of the original houses that were on either side, and something a little bit more that would fit in with the community. But to me, as far as the Heritage House goes, it does look like a renovation, not a restoration or a revitalization, as was said. This is a heritage conservation area. We need to follow the objectives that were set out when we formed this area, and I'm just not convinced that that's what this is what this application follows. I don't think they follow any of the 4 objectives fully, especially numbers 3 and number 4 in particular. This rendition is, like I said, getting closer, but in my opinion, it's just not quite there yet. I think I'd like to see something that more fully respects the HCA. And for example, I wouldn't mind seeing some of the insensitive things that were done to the Morris House in the 50s taken away and made more to what it looked like in when it was first built. And so for me, I just feel that it's just not quite there yet. And again, I would like to see it go back to the Heritage Commission to have another look at it before we would make our final decision. So I will vote against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Other discussion? Usually ask if anyone's going to go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship. Speaking in favor of the motion that's on the floor, I reason that the way forward for this, that there's ample justification for moving forward with a significant investment in the Morris House, and I can understand the community's interest in maintaining the standards of the HCA. I reason that the Morris House and its multi-unit sort of rental and multi-family dwelling type of character itself existed at the time of creation of the HCA and has been there for quite some time. And I think that the preservation of the house with its multi-unit character and with all those families living in that building, and with the history of the building being what it is, I think that that's paramount. Maintaining that rental opportunity, maintaining that multifamily environment, that and the Morris House being a bit of an anchor for the HCA in that way is most important. And it's a significant investment that needs to happen into that structure to make it viable for the years to come. And so this is how that investment is generated. This is the purpose of a heritage revitalization agreement. So there is not a very feasible way forward to affect the preservation of the Morris House and continue to have it be used in the way that it's being used without this level of intervention on the lot. And I recognize it's quite a lot, but we've also seen large houses left to degrade along Beach Avenue. We've heard from the community their level of unhappiness with the latest demolitions along Beach Avenue. I want to see this house retained. I want to see it retained in using its rental character. I think this is the way to affect that. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Others wishing to speak to the motion, go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone for the presentations and comments and all the correspondence that we received as well, and to the planning department for their work. This is a really tough one because we need new rental housing in Oak Bay. There is no question. This proposal will, in fact, add, I think it was 9 units of rental housing, and then secondary suites in each of the houses. This is what we're trying to attain in Oak Bay, a balance in housing and housing development. And I actually think that this is probably the best proposal of the past couple. We've gone at this a couple of times at least, and this conversion. There were a lot of alterations made to this house clearly in the mid-century that cannot be totally reversed, and that's an issue. I think the applicant is doing the best they can with a very challenging project, and I think the heritage consultant said that to all of us, that this was a sort of a balancing act. I think that they've answered the call in the sense that we asked them to come back with a different design for the 2 new homes in the front. That was completed. I actually think it's a pretty good project given everything else, and my concern about the property is that it is currently vulnerable, and it's vulnerable for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that if this doesn't go forward, it could look very differently. It could be a very different development, I think. And I'm concerned about that because I think there's real value in what is being offered here. And I think as much as possible, this proposal respects the heritage character and values as much as possible. It doesn't meet all the standards, but I don't think any house built in Oak Bay meets every standard that we expect. I also think it's complementary to the neighborhood to the degree that I think we talked about the exposure on the Prospect Place side. It enhances the streetscape as opposed to detracting from it. And streetscape is an important feature in heritage conservation as well. So I know that not everyone in this room will be happy should this go forward, but I think this is a good compromise, and sometimes in this world of housing, you have to make compromises. I think this is a pretty good compromise. And I was involved with the Heritage Commission myself. I was the chair at one time. I do have a passion for heritage in Oak Bay, and I'm very concerned about it. I think this protects this property, frankly, and protects the heritage value of this property. But I would like to just make a point about the Heritage Commission. My feeling is that it's important that we share these projects with our Heritage Commission. I often think that we should do that out of courtesy, regardless of whether or not we have a direction from council. I would like this proposal to be shared with the Heritage Commission out of courtesy at the very least. I think we owe them that. We have a Heritage Commission for a reason, and that's the reason that they should be able to weigh in on these proposals. They are a resource. They're the best resource we have for heritage, other than private heritage consultants. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Just going to take your comment into a procedural question to staff. Is it, we generally look to refer items to our committees, advisory committees, or commissions in a way that brings it back to this table. Is it feasible in our process to refer, if this passes, to also refer this back to the revised plans back to Heritage Commission and their comments to come back, because this is not approving anything tonight, but referring it to a future public hearing and receive their comments back as part of the public hearing process? Mr. Mistravik?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. If Council directed staff to proceed with drafting the bylaws to move this application forward this evening, then there would be sufficient time to bring it to the Heritage Commission and receive their comments before bringing the bylaws back for first reading. And
Okay,
so
but
it
even
could be brought
before
back for first
public
reading
hearing.
with those comments.
Okay.
It would have to be before public hearing as well, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think we can just do that. We have a motion on the floor right now. If that's your will, Councillor Green, I'll give you the opportunity to also refer this to make that recommendation for consideration. But right now, I'm going to deal with the application as it sits right here. I don't have anybody else on the speaking list. Oh, Councillor Smart.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to speak. I echo many of the comments around the table, and I just think the gift of this is a significantly sized building, and the gift of this revitalization to the community is going to be significant. This is a lot more of an undertaking than restoring a single family house. And I do feel like the applicant has addressed all of the concerns that we asked them to look at in our December meeting. So I am very comfortable in the, I think the word balance came up quite a bit. I do think that although this isn't what everybody had hoped for this site, I do feel like it's a very thoughtful application that has struck the balance of providing amenity to the community.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll speak briefly. I'm supportive of this going forward. I think we want to get the details written up in a bylaw, and I do look forward to the public input on this. I think by its very nature, these kind of applications have broader public interest than just the immediate. And I think in our consideration of this, we're balancing, as noted here, housing issues, heritage issues, cohesiveness, affordability, and other factors. I think eyes wide open. This is not producing a lot of affordable housing in this case, but it is providing, I think, as noted, 6 additional rental and 3 new fee simple housing units that are in demand in the community and very close to the village. I would also just say that, I'm as I went through my pros and cons list looking at this, I'd say the cons really boil down to the specific heritage measures. And I think the points that have been raised in the letter so far, and I'm sure we'll hear them at public hearing as well, perhaps in some more detail, but they raise legitimate, thoughts on this. The ideal here would be to restore this house back to its original design. That would be best. It would be best to have a more open view of the house from Beach Drive. I can't deny that. I think, what we're looking at here is the balance between the other factors here and giving up some of those sort of, best practices or ideals around the heritage front. I am still open to hearing what people have to say on this. I do think that there is, as mentioned, value of just ensuring the protection, the ongoing life of this building, which will be different again going forward, but an integral part of the history of this area as well. So yeah, I'm supportive of the motion that's in front of us right now, and certainly looking forward to seeing it go through its process. I would be also supportive, I think, of seeing this go back to the Heritage, just in case they had any additional thoughts on the changes that have been made. I don't see any other hands here to speak to the motions. I don't see any requests to split them up because they really are tied together, so I will call the question. All those in favor of the motions and those opposed, Councillor Braithwaite registered as opposed. So that will go forward for drafting. I just want to thank the applicants for bringing this forward today. A big team of you here today to answer questions, but certainly we have a couple more stages to go through here as we move it forward. So thank you very much for your time this evening. And I think there's a lot of people here for this one item, so if people wish to leave at this time, you're welcome to, but you're also welcome to stay. I would just ask if you don't gather and speak in the hallway there, because it's an echo chamber. We tend to hear them loud in here. We are going to move to item number 7.1 at this time, which is the Climate Action Program with Ms. Woods. Welcome. Oh, Mr. Gould. I don't think I've ever heard a quieter group going out of here. Well done.
Point of order. Apparently we need a resolution.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we do. So do you want to Do you want to make the motion to refer it to Heritage and have that come back as part of the information package for the first and second reading?
Okay, I will move that the application be referred to the Heritage Commission for comment and recommendation and come back to us. Yeah.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Nope. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed, not opposed? So their comments will come back to join us at the next meeting where it comes back. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Green. My apologies. No, well, that's my job to remember those things, so my apologies. Okay, 7.1, Climate Action Program. Ms. Woods? Oh, Mr. Bull, you need to introduce. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a few words, and then I'll ask Ms. Woods to speak. But the report in front of you today marks an important milestone following Council's direction in 2023. And despite challenges in the labour market, we have now increased staff capacity for this important work. And today we are able to outline a proposed climate action program to you. This program looks ahead at the coming 2 years with projects and funding. And our senior planner, Climate Action, Ms. Megan Woods, will now highlight the key features of the program.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to be here tonight to give a brief introduction to the Climate Action Program. Similar to the Housing Action Program report, the Climate Action Program report provides a high-level, though not exhaustive, overview of climate action work underway and planned in the district, including council priority projects as well as other initiated projects that will address this important issue over the next few years. Council has identified climate change and environment as a priority and has established council priority projects related to the topic, including developing plans for climate action, both on the community side and for municipal operations, implementing GHG and energy reduction in buildings, and implementing climate and sustainability related projects and programs. As stated in the report, details and scope for the corporate and community climate action plans will be shared with Council during the project sign-off process that will be presented to Council later in Q1. Both projects will consider climate adaptation as well as mitigation measures, acknowledging that there is both a need to reduce emissions as well as to plan for a changing climate. This report is designed to keep Council updated on developments related to the climate action, and to present these projects under the umbrella of a climate action program. Staff are recommending that Council direct staff to begin this important work of implementing a climate action program as described in the staff report, and that the budget allocations be brought forward during the 2025 budget process. Additionally, staff are recommending changing the title of Council Priority Project number 36 from Develop an Energy Plan for Municipal Operations to Develop a Corporate Climate Action Plan. This would allow for more alignment with a community plan and offer an opportunity to look more widely at the environmental impact from municipal operations. Both myself and Brian Green, Deputy Director of Community Building and Planning Services, can take questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Just going to do some little meeting management here. We're an hour and a half into the meeting. We have a number of significant items to get to, so I'm just going to ask people to make their questions fairly tight, and same thing with responses, so we can kind of get through the questions portion of this. I'll turn to body here. Councillor Patterson and then Smart.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Ms. Woods. Thank you very much for the report. I just am wondering if you can help clarify for me potential overlapping goals of CAP, the Climate Action Plan or Program, and CERT, the Climate and Emergency Response Plan, because there will be overlapping things, particularly like things like EV-ready fleet plans and whatnot. And I'm just wondering how you'll make the decision on who takes the lead and how they merge.
Ms. Woods?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I think that's an important item to point out of overlap there. Through the process of the project sign-off for both the corporate and community climate action plans, we can look at that in a little bit more detail. I think presumably adaptation and resilience will be the key areas of overlap between those two plans, and thanks for highlighting that.
Councillor Smart?
Yeah, thank you. My first question is just with regards to the comment on page 6 of the Climate Action Program report, through you, Mayor, to Ms. Woods or staff. It states that the province requires that funding allocated for the first 2 years of the LG cap totaling $292,164 be spent by the end of March 2025. Is there a chance that the province may not extend this funding and that we could lose those funds?
Ms. Woods?
Through the mayor, that funding's already been allocated from the province, and what they've asked is for municipalities to forecast plans for spending that money if they're not expected to meet the March 31st deadline. And so from what I've read, there doesn't seem to be a risk of that funding being rescinded necessarily, but there is a request that by the end of February, we provide a forecast, which is outlined in this report, for how we would allocate that funding. Thank you.
Councillor Smart?
Thank you for that. Through you, Mayor, to Ms. Woods, I guess most of my question is, so it sounds like you're saying there's zero risks that council doesn't need to consider today giving direction around, potentially spending that money by the end of the March in order to not lose those funds. That was my question.
Ms. Woods? You never say 0% risk, obviously, but...
I appreciate that. Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Not to my knowledge, no. I don't believe so.
Can I just follow up on that very briefly and just, if we were to get the word that they were not going to extend it or do that, can I just ask, would staff come back to council at that point and seek direction in short order?
Yes, absolutely.
Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. My next question through you, Mayor, to Ms. Woods is it something that should be considered to undertake our corporate and community plans at the same time for the sense of economizing the schedule and the engagement process, or is that just way too much? I'm just wondering, because it's mostly consultant based, if that is possible and something we should consider. And if not, I guess I'm wondering if I could have some clarity around which items are in the corporate plan and which items are in the community plan. And the things that I'm unclear about are things such as active transportation, the B Street project on Belker Creek, and those things are kind of on municipal property, but community related. So what I'm wanting to know to answer the question of whether or not we should go ahead with prioritizing the corporate plan first is what things are in the corporate plan versus the community plan.
Ms. Woods?
Through the mayor, I'll just answer the first question first. I don't expect that there would be a lot of community engagement for the corporate plan. There will be a lot of internal engagement, interdepartmental engagement, but my expectation is that there would be comprehensive, consultation and engagement for a community climate action plan. And so in that way, they're separate processes. And then I think to the extent that I expect there to be community engagement for the community climate action plan, I believe the immediate focus is on the OCP review and community engagement associated with that project. And so the proposal was to follow that with the community climate action plan, just recognizing staff capacity and the community's capacity for engagement on both these projects. And then just to make sure I get to the second part of the question, what's in both plans? Certainly that will be scoped to a good extent in the project sign-offs. But the corporate climate action plan will focus on traditional municipal services. So it's the items that we report to the province through the local government community climate action program. So that's things like energy in buildings, emissions from our fleet vehicles, waste, all associated with municipal operations, as well as our contracted emissions as well. So those are emissions that are generated through, usually mobile sources through our contracts. And then on the community side, I think more of the items that you listed would fall into that category.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. Anything else?
Thank you. That's really helpful. I guess through you, Mayor and Ms. Woods, I just wouldn't mind clarity again then on the recommendation of phasing those. I recall it was to do the corporate one first and the community plan next. Could you just reiterate for me the sort of timeline of when we would get to the point of having the community plan?
Woods?
Through the mayor, that will be articulated in the project sign-off, and it's expected for delivery in 2026, the Community Climate Action Plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I obviously have lots of things I want to talk about on this subject, and I hope that we could have, I guess my other question then is about touch points, because there's so much to talk about, and this hasn't come to a committee of the whole, but to a council, but with regards to, I guess, a lot of the little pieces along the way that would be umbrellaed in this. So I guess maybe my last question would be, considering that active transportation is one of the most impactful things we can do with regards to our climate action and reducing greenhouse gases, what is the relationship going to be with having our climate action program within community planning and the active transportation mainly happening in engineering, and how will that be organized and liaised so that it's kind of all under one package? Thank you.
Ms. Woods? Mr. Bull? Obviously, one's not waiting for the other. They're going in parallel, but please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think that's an example where some of the climate action is already planned, and through the plans for active transportation improvements, we are already planning some investments. And I think the climate action plan takes that vital look. We'll definitely, through the Climate Action Plan project, we'll make sure that our other departments, of course, have input as well. And so we have an opportunity at that time to have a closer look at what is already planned, what else could be planned, perhaps. It will stay high level, so I don't think it will get into the details of transportation planning. But there's an opportunity there to align what's already underway and some of the longer-term planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. My last question, I promise. Through you, Mayor, to staff, what kind of metrics of success will staff be able to report back to us on, and could that potentially happen twice a year instead of once a year, just to understand that we are prioritizing at the council table the most impactful things towards our climate program and working on our quick wins? Thank you.
Ms. Woods?
Through the mayor, so we'll be moving forward with annual community emissions monitoring, as sort of outlined at a high level in this report, and so we should have at least have annual community emissions, and we should more frequently, with our established corporate emissions inventory, be able to provide more up-to-date reporting on what's happening corporately as well. There's no reason why we couldn't report more frequently than what we've proposed if directed to do so. There would be a natural sort of touch point with the LG cap reporting that we do to the province and annually. And sorry, I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other hands for questions at this time. I had just one question, and that was the in this proposal there was a move. So right now, there's regionally there's a biannual community GHG inventory. There's a suggestion that we go to an annual. Can I just ask, I mean, it's such an estimated process, right? You're sort of looking at overall things, and those trends aren't fast. They're the numbers of cars and those sorts of things. So what's the advantage? Because it costs money to do it every year as opposed to every 2 years. So what's the advantage of doing it every year as opposed to just following what the region is doing and doing it every 2 years to follow the trends?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think the benefit for the first part would be to align with our neighbors in City of Victoria and District of Saanich. They do an annual emissions inventory. And then it does just allow us to stay more on top of the smaller changes that are happening within the community from an emissions perspective. But those would be the primary benefits.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to go to members of the public. Anybody from, oh, sorry, I go to Councillor Appleton. If any members of the public wish to speak, though, you can come forward at this time, and we'll go to you after this. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be brief. I just want to just confirm something I think that was asked before, but I'd just like to double check on it. So the staff recommendation here is that the climate action program be implemented using funding from the Climate Action Reserve Fund through LGCAP. So what I heard earlier was that if for whatever reason we are informed that LGCAP funding is not available, or for whatever reason has been rescinded or cannot be extended, then that would mean that the climate action program in its entirety would need to return to council for decisions based around how those individual components would be funded. Do I have that correct?
Ms. Woods?
Through the mayor, just to clarify, the funding that we're talking about that we need to forecast for was the first 2 years of LGCAP funding. We've also received funding in 2024 for 3 years of the LGCAP program. So it allows us to do a little bit more longer term planning. But of course, if there was any impact to that funding, then we would come back to council and ask for individual items to be funded. Yes. Thank you.
Councillor Appleton?
Thank you for that. So then if for whatever reason any of the funding that is contemplated in the table on page 7 of the staff report is not available, then that CAP table of projects would be returned to council for evaluation.
Woods?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. So you just all these things that have public input, just so everybody knows, this is how we do it. We have council ask questions. We have the opportunity for public input, and then we'll come back to this table for some direction. Process is the same as the public input portion, just your name, municipality of residence, and you have, I'm trying to ask you to keep it to about 3 minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council and staff. Ian Graham, Saanich resident, speaking on behalf of the Friends of Boker Creek Society. And we submitted a letter this morning, and we also co-signed a letter with the Community Association of Oak Bay. And I'd just like to quickly highlight a few points that we made in the letter, the one with the rendering on page 3. So our society has a number of projects that are helping build community and ecosystem resilience, directly contributing to district and regional climate goals. So, 1,000 rain gardens, our salmon recovery project, lots of riparian restoration. We've also actively participated in the district's Cool Kit program. And we support the existing and proposed projects described in the staff report. I think the new climate action planner has done a good job bringing a lot of those pieces together and helping to create a pathway forward. We have a few comments on the staff report. Firstly, under part 1, so that's the completed/underway section, we suggest you add a reference to the urban forest management strategy. Managing the urban forest for climate change adaptation is one of the 5 stated objectives of the strategy. Your parks manager has been, a great champion of that strategy, and it's linked indirectly to the Cool Kit program. But we think the strategy, you should profile it in the program. Secondly, we'd ask you to reference the Boker Creek Initiative. So that's the partnership between the municipalities, community, and stewardship groups, and the work on the Boker Creek Blueprint. So, a major focus of that initiative right from when it was established is around climate adaptation. So things like managing stormwater, moderating flows, mitigating flooding, and cooling neighborhoods in the face of climate change. Lots of the technical studies that have been commissioned by that initiative are directly tied to adaptation. You know, how do we manage this watershed given increasing frequency, intensity of winter storms and flooding, for example? So there's just, I don't know if you need to put a sort of an extra, budget line item next to it, but I think it's just good to have it there. Like it's another initiative that you can actually leverage some funding and, actually staff horsepower. And then thirdly, we'd actually request that you include council priority number 55, I think /26. I think they were combined, in one of the council discussions. It's that council priority project that encompasses the Beaucret B Cool Kit proposal, which we presented to you close to 2 years ago. So even though it's categorized in the council priorities plan under the livability bucket, climate, it really is, climate change and environment are really central to that proposal. It was developed in response to the Cool Kit program, and it also aligns well with a lot of the climate preparedness and adaptation work, of the province. So rainwater management, healthy watersheds, biodiversity, resilient ecosystems, nature-based solutions. If you look at the provincial strategy that, is kind of encompasses that LG gap funding, it really is kind of a bullseye. So it'd be really great to include that in the go forward piece, with a modest budget to just get the thing started, like a basic planning study. So in summary, good staff report, consider adding urban forest strategy, Beaucret Creek initiative to part 1, and then include council priority project 55 as an item in part 2. And lastly, we look forward to working closely with council and staff as you launch that OCP and the climate action plan process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. I'm just going to turn to Ms. Woods and just ask, and the next person, if anybody else wishes to speak, you can come up at this time. This is the only chance we have to speak to this item, but before you speak, I'm going to just ask, extend sort of those comments to a question for Ms. Woods. Just those sorts of things, just reference to, our internal programs like urban forest, council priority projects like the B Street piece, or external agencies that we are tied to and use for advice and partnership like the Beaucret Creek Initiative. How are those going to be referenced in this plan? They may not have to be line items in this part of it tonight, but there are obviously initiatives underway and do, as noted, relate. So do you have any sense of how those sorts of things will be sort of referenced, referred to, and overseen in the reporting? If you don't know the answer yet, that's fine. I think it's part of the reason tonight is just to raise these questions. Ms. Woods?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll maybe just start and say that for the purpose of this report, there might have been some omissions there, and certainly was an exhaustive list of all the climate action work that's been happening, and so I do acknowledge that there was some items that were missed. And then in terms of the planning processes going forward, I think the goal of the climate action plans will be to not replicate plans that have already happened or duplicate items, but to seek to potentially elevate them or bolster them through additional policies and programs. Some of that will be laid out in the project sign-offs, and perhaps pass it to you, Andre. Thank you.
Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As Ms. Woods is outlining, the scope of this report has been narrowly focused on those climate initiatives that have not quite been actioned. But there's this wider picture, definitely, where there's other projects that the district is already planning or contemplating, at least, that also have very relevant climate action relevance. And we'll hope to, in the future, to build out this plan. I think right now we're looking at the start and then the core package that we need to action in the coming 2 years, but it will definitely result in further reflection and consideration of all the other things that the district also is considering. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Please go ahead. Same process, just name and municipality, residents. Go ahead.
Jane Evans, Oak Bay. And I really actually want to come up here and ask a question, but I don't know if I can ask a question.
We may not be able to answer it, but we'll try.
Right. Okay. So I noticed with Cool Kit and looking at the provincial climate change charter and the LG cap that you guys are talking about and the report, there's a lot of focus on GHG emissions and reducing greenhouse gases. And I've always wondered from the start when I took part in Cool Kit, why there wasn't some discussion about stormwater and the whole system, the water system, the biodiversity. It seemed to be so focused on GHG. So I guess I'd like to ask that question. Is that really what the province is steering towards? Is that what you're having to address? And can we add these other questions to climate change in there? And I guess that's just reiterating what Ian said at the same time. But my question, I guess, is that actually what you've been asked to deal with? Is mostly GHG? Because
Sure,
it
I'll
seems like.
put the question to staff and Ms. Woods. I know we do have things like the Cool Kit programs over here, which are more around adaptation than around mitigation. But please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor. There is a lot of focus on GHG emissions reductions. It doesn't limit us, and certainly I would expect that the climate action plan, the community climate action plan, but to some extent the corporate one as well, might look more broadly than that, to think about whole systems, low carbon resilience, green infrastructure. I don't think we're limited just to GHG reduction, although there is a lot of emphasis on that, and that's where we perhaps can set those numerical targets and see progress that way. But I understand there to be lots of different measures. Thank you.
Any other people wishing to speak at this point? Not seeing any bills coming forward. I'm going to come back to this table. We have a recommendation here in front of us, but I'll start with a motion to receive the
Move
report.
receipt.
Moved and seconded. Hand for seconder. There we go. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? None opposed.
I'll
That
move the
carries.
staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. This is to implement the CAP program, change the title, and update annually. I'm happy to separate those if people wish, but otherwise I'm happy to call the question on all three. Councillors, if we can speak to the motion at this time, go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, I guess I would like to potentially add an amendment, which I guess might be option 2. So it's not that I'm not in support of the motion on the table, I am, but I did want to add, I was considering putting forward option 2 with just a clarification around reporting to us every 6 months with metrics. Would you prefer that as a motion arising after and passing this? Or would it be more beneficial for me to not support this motion? And
Well, I might suggest that I'm happy to separate the motions, and you want to change the last one that directed to annually update council. You'd rather have that be semi-annual? Is that your intention? I'll just separate the motion into 3, and you can make an amendment at that point, see if there's support. That's probably the best procedurally. Is there anything else you wish to speak to on the motion?
no, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Don't see other hands wishing to speak to the motion, which is usually an indication that it's got support. So I will call I'm going to separate them. So I'm just going to call the first portion. So the staff be directed to implement the climate action program as described. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. And then I move that the title be changed from Energy Plan for Municipal Operation to develop a corporate, anyway, as labeled there in the second part. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? And then the last one, and I think you wish to make an amendment, Councillor Smart?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to amend the third motion to read, and further that staff be directed to update, to biannually update council on the status of the climate action program with metrics beyond greenhouse gas emissions.
Semi-annual.
Semi-annual, yeah.
Sorry, can you read that again? So it's
Yep.
directed to semi-annually update council? and then-
Semi-annually update council on the status of the climate action program, including metrics in addition to greenhouse gas emissions.
I'll see if there's a seconder.
Second.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Before you just go on that, I just want, just so we have some sense from staff of what that would look like from a reporting perspective, because we always have other aspects of things coming forward for reporting. So from staff's perspective, is there any feedback in terms of a semi-annual versus annual? Go ahead, Mr. Bowl.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Couple of thoughts. There is for council council priority projects, there is a reporting twice a year. So those reports in this program that fit in there will get an update there. I think a more detailed semi-annual reporting might be challenging in terms of available data, but yeah, any thoughts on Ms. Woods? So yeah, there would be some challenges with regards to details of data, but a general project update I think would be provided through the council priority project updates. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councilor Smart?
Yeah, I guess if I could just motivate to the motion, I guess it's twofold for me. One, and while this motion doesn't specifically address it, we definitely have a communication with the public situation where I think that we're even doing a lot of great stuff around the council table, but it isn't communicated out, and maybe that will be taken up with Oak Bay connects updates with a climate platform that doesn't currently come up right now. But the reason for the metrics and more than once a year is that I don't feel we're making so many decisions around the table almost at every meeting that overlap with the potential for climate action. And I don't feel like I'm aware of how much impact each of these decisions is really making and where we should be prioritizing our energy with regards to climate action. And it's going to be a little while before we have, probably not even within this council term, before we really have a completed community plan. And so what I feel like I need around the table to really make great decisions is to have a little bit of a sense of even 5 or 6 easy to understand metrics of things that we're doing, because in addition to, I'm fine with the yearly updates on the greenhouse gas emissions, but what about all the other aspects of climate that have come up today that we've had speakers speak about? What about biodiversity? Like what are we doing with regards to the cohesive picture of climate action? I just don't, perhaps this is coming from the fact that I'm so excited to have a climate action planner, and I'm just eager to have us at a state where we can utilize a sense of organization. And I guess I'm concerned about waiting another 2 years to be at a spot where we have this plan to give us some more guidance.
Thank you, Councilor Smart. The motion right now is to amend, as noted. Anybody else wish to speak to the amendment? Councilor Green and Patterson?
Yeah, I can empathize with Councillor Smart. I think there is sometimes a feeling of an uncoordinated approach. We kind of lose the loose ends, and it's hard sometimes, I think, to articulate clearly where we are and what we're doing on each of these projects. So, and I think it's wonderful that we have a climate action planner now, because that will help to bring it all together. But I understand what Councillor Smart is saying. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, yeah, Councillor Appleton. Oh, sorry, and then Patterson. My apologies.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just speaking in favor of semi-annual reporting. I tend to concur that I think, we have an important piece in terms of having a point person and a staff person in the planning role to be able to coordinate these initiatives. I think there's a lot of value in coordinating our CAP reporting at the same time or in conjunction with our council priority projects reporting. I would love to see in the future, and we're not there yet, but I would really love to see a more an integration of CAP related items with other climate impacting projects like active transportation, like individual projects like the Bowker B Street walkway that folks have mentioned tonight. I think that the objective and the hope in the median term is to have those things be more integrated, and just in terms of how we consider those things. So I think that moving to this schedule of reporting helps us move in that direction, and there's still work to do, but I would like to see our quote unquote engineering projects, or a lot of these practical projects that rolled out through council priority projects, be more integrated with CAPRA related work in the longer term. So work in progress, but I think that this helps us commit to doing that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appley. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate Councillor Smart comments about this, but I'm speaking against the motion, and I really think that what is put forward, that it be reported annually in the context of everything we're doing right now, is satisfactory to meet our needs now. My expectation would be that as projects come forward for council consideration, that the staff, whichever department is involved, will be speaking about climate action initiatives that are relevant to a project. And so we will still get that lens to it, but I think to be demanding a review of it all on a semi-annual basis, especially at this point in time, is extra work that will not be that beneficial in outcome. So I'm speaking against the motion.
Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you very much, and thanks for bringing this forward, Councillor Smart. I understand I understand wanting to have semi-annual reporting, but I think what I hear staff saying is that that's going to be very difficult. And so based on that, and based on the comments that Councillor Patterson just mentioned, I'll be voting against this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I always like people to speak up if they're speaking against, and I'm going to speak against the motion. Again, I totally understand the rationale for it, but with a staff of one, when we're asking for more reports to come, it means there's less work being done. And so bottom line of this is I think let's deal with at least the first year and see how it goes. If we need more often and more frequently, then let's get that. But I think we've got those pieces. If this would advance those projects faster, then I would support it. But I don't think the reporting is the key part of this. So I can't support the motion. I look forward to the reports coming in. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will also not be supporting the motion for the same reasons, because I think we need to focus on the work, and that on a semi-annual basis, things are at such a fine grain. There may have been small movement, and that those small incremental changes are not significant enough to really to be expecting staff to reporting back to us, because it does take a significant amount of time given the scope of the plan, even at its attenuated version here. So I don't support semi-annual reporting at this time.
Okay, I think we've all spoken to this, so I'm going to call the question. Again, the motion on the floor is to amend. So the motion in favor is to change it from once a year to twice a year reporting. Call the question now. All those in favor of the amendment? Councillor Green, Councillor Smart, and Councillor Appleton, and those opposed? Opposed are Patterson, Braithwaite, Watson, and myself. That motion fails. We're back to the main motion, which is the staff be directed to annually update council on the status of climate action programs. That motion is already made and live on the floor. Any other discussion on that one? Good discussion overall. Councillor Smart.
Thanks. I will be supporting the original motion. I just want to point out that my reasoning behind wanting metrics more frequently is that I really do want this new position, the staff position to be a leadership position that really takes in all the different things happening in the municipality. And there's so many things that have gotten lost along the way without having this position over the last couple of years. We still haven't heard back about the bus passes for youth that we passed a motion about for life users. Like, where is that project? End of trip facilities on Oak Bay Avenue. We haven't seen that. There's probably 20 of these little things that we've actually put forward that haven't yet happened. And I just want to make sure that things don't continue to get lost. And I have a concern about checking in every year and not having almost like a comprehensive list of knowing like what are we getting done. But I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Apologies, I keep hitting it in the wrong order. Welcome, Mr. Rennick. This is item number 7.2, McNeill Bay Erosion Prevention Program. This is for a council project sign-off. We have Mr. Rennick, our Director of Engineering and Public Works, with us. This is probably a bit of a less intensive Q&A portion of this, but we'll see. But the same process. It is subject to public input. We'll have the presentation, your introduction. We'll have questions. Go to the public, come back to this table for direction. Welcome, Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as you requested that I be brief, I do not have a slide deck. This is seeking council project sign-off to initiate the McNeill Bay Erosion Prevention Program, which is a council priority project. We were successful in achieving some grant funds to carry out this work under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. And we are simply seeking council direction to initiate the project, and we are happy to take any questions. I don't know why I'm using the royal we. I am happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, all of you. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thanks for, through you to Mr. Rennick. Thank you very much for the report. And my only question was around the erosion mitigation project. Was at one end of McNeill Bay, which I believe is the south end, I think I'm correct, near Transit, at the end of Transit across Beach Drive. It's all asphalted there and hardscape. I'm just wondering, is that part of the project, or will that remain as is? Thank you.
Mr. Rennick.
Through the mayor, the immediate scope of this project is to look at the unprotected section of bluffs between Oliver and Monterey. However, certainly not opposed to discussing the community visions for other areas along the seawall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. I just want to one quick question, which I will just do to be pedantic, but because I want to make sure that it's included. The report references that the original broad scope of design included more of an engineered solution and a bioengineered solution, and I just wanted to ensure that a bioengineered solution was still on the table and was still being considered as part of the broader scope of things being considered by the consultant.
Mr. Rennick.
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct. In the 2022 update to the erosion assessment, there were 5 different solutions that were long-listed, and of the 5, 2 of them were advanced as potential preferred options, and one of those options was a bioengineered erosion protection design.
Rennick. Anything else, Councillor Appleton?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just one thing further. I understand that, just in evaluating, and folks have raised who frequent the bay, will often note that, there's some unconsolidated material, and it looks like potentially, some waste material that comes out of that bank in terms of chunks of metal and these kinds of things. And I'm just wondering whether or not the geotechnical, do we understand what the nature of that unconsolidated material is in there? Does the geotechnical analysis proposed here need to look at that a little bit closer?
Mr. Rennick.
Through the mayor, I would say that we have not done a full characterization of the site at this point in time in terms of test holing and finding out exactly what's in there. And I would expect that would be something that has to happen as a part of a detailed design once we have a preferred concept to advance to detailed design.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to staff.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Are there any other questions? Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Director Rennick. I just wanted to clarify what the sort of definition of success is at this project. Is it primarily around not flooding the roadway, or like to what extent are we looking at long-term mitigation against tsunami, rising sea waters? Like what, can you just clarify in a big picture what you would define as the success of this project? Thank you.
Mr. Rennick?
Through the mayor, I would say that a success to this project is having a design that protects the banks from further erosion, which could result in a risk of landslide, which could potentially put a well-used sidewalk and road in jeopardy, not to mention the damage that it would cause to habitat, potential disruption to culturally sensitive materials that may be contained within the bank. So I would say that a success for this project would be having a design that the community is happy with, that protects this area and lowers the risk of a natural disaster that could harm the area.
Anything else, Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Director Rennick. My only other question is, should the scope of this project produce, say, an increased public amenity that would more properly be rolled out across the entire bay? And I realize this is expanding upon a question that's come up already. Is that something that council should be directing now as far as the appetite for the improvement expanding beyond the parameters that you just mentioned? Or is that something that staff would potentially bring up when we were at sort of the next touch point of the designs?
Mr. Rennick?
Through the mayor, I would say that keeping the scope, at least as far as the grant goes, to the portion that was described, the portion that's in need of protection, would be important. If there's a desire to see perhaps a replacement to the concrete wall, I would see that as a separate scope of work.
Thank you. I'll invite anybody who wishes to speak to this matter to come forward now. I just have one question, and then we'll go to the public, and then we'll come back here if there's any comments. But Mr. Rennick, I think sort of along the same lines, I guess, you know, when I read through this and going back to the original report, there was, as noted, a number of options, sort of two primary sort of options to this. But I do know from, you know, previous work on this, gosh, probably a decade or more ago, it was first looked at, that there was some consideration of doing some, you know, work, I think, to Councillor Smart's question about, you know, like if you go out a bit further down the beach, there's ways of mitigating some of the damage to the concrete wall or changing the waveforms that come into that to do erosion mitigation. And so I guess the question here is really, like, is there room within this options plan to kind of, if the report coming back doing that evaluation identifies some new looks at this, that there's flexibility here to look at the question more broadly than narrowly?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there's absolutely an opportunity to look at broader options. I would note that in the report, as I mentioned in an earlier response, there have been 5 kind of long lists that went down to 2. Some of those broader changes to the bay that do things like change the angle the waves come at, they unfortunately do also have habitat impacts. And we know that seals and ducks and all sorts of other wildlife use that bay. And so we do need to be careful about, if we make changes to the hydraulics of how the water approaches the beach, are we now changing food sources? Are we impacting eelgrass? You know, there can be unintended consequences. So we do need to look at the big picture for how these decisions impact aquatic wildlife, as well as the aims and goals of the community.
Thank you for that. Any members of the public who wish to speak to us on this, the McNeill Bay erosion prevention? Not seeing anybody. Come back to this table.
Move receipt.
Move receipt of the report. Seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
I just wanted to say that I was really thrilled to see this item on the agenda, as it's definitely one of the items that has been at the top of my mind as well as others on the top of their lists to be taken care of before it gets a lot worse. So I'm really thrilled that staff brought it to the agenda today. So thank you very much for that, and I look forward to getting something done in that area. I think that it's time. It's definitely time that it was taken care of, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. All right, seeing no other discussion, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Moving on to item number 7.3, the official community plan and zoning bylaw updates. This is the engagement strategy. Mr. Green.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. This report responds to the Council direction from September the 23rd of last year, where Council will recall it signed off on the project sign-off for the updates to both the official community plan and the zoning bylaw in response to the changes at the provincial level with regards to ensuring that OCPs are reviewed and revised by December the 31st of this year to ensure that they accommodate a 20-year supply of housing and incorporate the housing needs report. So this report responds to that council direction and presents to council a high-level engagement strategy for the upcoming updates to those two projects, and sets out at a high level how that update will be undertaken with the community over the course of the next 12 months or 10 months. Happy to answer any questions that council may have on the report.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from members of council for staff? Councillor Patterson and Smart.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. Thank you for the report. I think that there will be there's pretty great interest in the OCP right now by all members of the community. I noticed in the report that the public input is in kind of summer, fall 2025. I'm wondering if we can clarify a little bit more about, summer or fall. could be quite a broad time period. Summer is sometimes we don't get that great a response from people. So I'm wondering if we can be a little clearer on when that public input would be planned and what plans, if any, we have to advise residents in advance to be prepared for this coming to them.
Mr. Green.
Through your worship, I guess there's two sort of main opportunities for public input that's proposed in August. So what we've done, we've been developing a work plan, and the current thinking or current work plan is showing that we'll be doing those 3 community events in the springtime. So around mid-May is the current timeline for those engagement events on phase 2. And then on phase 3, which would be the draft plan, those will be planned for September. In terms of them advertising or promoting those events, then we'll be using all communication channels to try and get the word out on those events. So we will also be working with a communications consultant to help us with some comms, as well as in terms of ensuring that we're getting flyers to each individual resident and the usual channels of communication to get the message out to promote and advertise those events, and which we've generally been successful with, like last year with the infill housing and the very well attended events. And I'm sure that we will ensure that these events are also well attended to ensure that everybody can have their say on an important document.
Thank you. I have Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff. I wanted to know if we needed to give direction today around whether or not there would be a mail out. The wording seemed to suggest there might be a mail out, and I just recall how impactful it was when we did our infill housing to have that mail out. So I just wondered, is that something that staff is confident that we'll be proceeding with, or do they need direction from council?
Mr. Green.
Through your worship, obviously this is a high-level engagement strategy, and as we get into the commencement of each phase of the plan, we will work with our with the project team to understand how best to get the word out, but I can definitely see that we will be using flyers to ensure that people are made aware of the project. I don't see the need for a council motion, but obviously if council wishes to make that motion, then that would be great. But if not, then I think that's inevitable that we will be doing some kind of flyer to residents to ensure that people are aware of these events in the spring.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Anything else?
Yeah, two more questions. I really appreciated the detail in the report, and just in thinking about the open houses that are mentioned, it wasn't entirely clear to me how interactive and participatory they would be, as far as like potentially using block models or visual recorders or a way of engaging people in the more complex discussion beyond how high is it going to be there. I just wondered if you could elaborate if you had an increased sense of how participatory and interactive the workshops might be.
Green?
Through your worship, we haven't got down to that level of details to those individual events, but I suspect we think that particularly events in the spring where we will be presenting land use scenarios, that those events will definitely be more on the collaborative scale of the IP2 spectrum, whereas the events in the fall will be more on the consultation side, so that's what we are currently thinking, but we haven't actually worked out the event plans for those 3 in-person events in May as to what style of interactive workshop they will be, but I can suspect that there will be a mixture of sort of open house with some kind of presentation as well as some kind of workshop to ensure that we get as much information and input from residents and the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff. Will there be a discussion around the potential growth of the boundaries of urban village centers versus the height of urban village centers? I just wondered, I know that this is a refresh and we all want to get to a lot of work that we won't be able to do everything this year. And so I just wanted to know, as our community, contemplates that decision of how they want to deal with potential density, are we going to have a bit of a discussion around the height versus the growth of urban village centers?
Recognize this is an engagement plan, but it's still important to kind of contemplate how we're going to do that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, yes. Through your worship, we haven't got to that level of detail yet. That being said, it's worth acknowledging that this is not just an OCP update, it's also an update to the zoning bylaw, because we will have to pre-zone land. So we know that in the latter stages of this process, we'll need to start that zoning bylaw update, and so we will be getting into some fairly more details as to what those blocks are and where those blocks need to be to ensure that we can demonstrate that we can provide that 5-year and 20-year supply of housing sites. But this evening I can't tell you exactly what that may look like, but I know that we'll probably need to provide more detail than we probably have our current OCP shows, given that we'll need to be fairly specific as to how we are meeting that 20-year supply of housing, and to also ensure that it's viable as well in terms of the building form.
Other questions of staff? Just before I go to the public then, just very quickly, the one thing in this engagement strategy I think I found missing, and I'm just curious if it's worth maybe just, I guess I just wanted some clarification. I know that a lot of this work is by law, that we have to bring it up into alignment with the Bill 44. And I think the conversation we've had to this date has been, this is an opportunity for us to have an in-depth look at multifamily as a way of achieving some of these housing goals. But there's no mention in here of that as a priority, of sort of, focusing on multifamily zones and doing that. And I just basically want confirmation. That's because I think our engagement plan we should be as clear about that as from the very beginning, because I think a lot of people have felt that there's so I'm expopulating this point, but is the engagement plan to be as clear as possible that we are really looking for community input on the multifamily zoning changes potential in the community?
We haven't, I guess through the chair, we haven't necessarily called it that way because the province requires us to update our OCP to show a 20-year supply of housing size. It doesn't, they haven't said that we need to show where multi-unit residential will be going. And so we do need to look at the spectrum of housing types, acknowledging that we have made significant changes in relation to our infill housing programme, and that may generate a number of units, but we also need to look at other forms. And when we talk about multi-unit residential, it could be townhouses. We know that in some cases multi-unit residential is not as viable as it used to be, given the cost of construction. So we need to ensure that we might need to look at other housing forms or other ways of achieving that housing, not necessarily just in a 4 to 6 story multi-unit residential typology.
Okay, I'll take that. I think we're going to have some difficulty. Well, leave it at that. I take the as a consultation plan. I think this is a reasonable way of going about it. Then I guess the follow-up question to that is, where do we start driving into some of the agreement about what it is that we are going to the community to talk about? Because I know there are some limits here in terms of time and space. Mr. Green?
Well, I guess in the spring is where we would be in the work plan and in the engagement strategy talking about those land use scenarios, and so there might be 2 or 3 different land use scenarios that we will develop with the project team and internal staff workshops, and then present those land use scenarios and get feedback on those land use scenarios with the public to help us try and see if there is a preferred land use scenario that could be taken forward into a draft plan.
And last question, I had it right in front of me and now I've lost it again. Just trying to look it up. Is one of the key partners that we're working with consultation, University of Victoria?
Through your worship, yeah, I think we've identified the need to meet with some specific landowners, community institutions, and so UVic, Erosion College, some other institutions may definitely be the need to have more one-on-one meetings to understand what their future aspirations are, their plans are for their individual sites are.
Sure, thank you. And I would encourage that reach out happen as soon as possible with UVic, because of course they expressed their desire to take an active participation role and probably needed for their Cedar Hill Corner property as a potential development site, and so that we need to work with them. But they have a small team, very stretched, so I think it's just that's really an early part of the outreach.
Yeah, I think we've already met with them on this, and there's I think another meeting planned in the near future as well.
Great, thank you very much. That's all my questions. Anybody from the public who wishes to talk to us about this, please come forward. You know the process?
I know the process. Thank you. Rachel Scarth, an Oak Bay resident and a director of Friends of Bowker Creek. Thank you, Your Worship, Council and staff, for the opportunity to address the official community plan and zoning bylaw engagement strategy. Members of the Friends of Bowker Creek, the Community Association of Oak Bay, and the Oak Bay Climate Force met to discuss this OCP, to review the proposed engagement strategy, and to provide Council with our collective response as described in our joint letter that you received earlier today. Reviewing the MODIS engagement strategy, we're very glad to see the specific engagement of community organizations as members of the community interest group category, and that there will be in-person community events to bring us together during phase 2. The OCP engagement process has the potential to ensure Oak Bay will respond to the challenge of climate change with nature-based solutions, rainwater management, a healthy watershed, and resilient ecosystems to the benefit of all our community. We'd like to request reconsideration of the levels of participation for community associations as community interest holders in the engagement process. The engagement timeline on page 13 of the MODIS engagement strategy describes the engagement for the public and community interest holders in phase 2 at the level of inform, consult, and involve. We would like to have the engagement participation levels of consult and collaborate as partners in the decision process on those specific aspects of the OCP in which our organizations have a history of engagement, specifically those issues related to climate mitigation and adaptation, building community, and ecosystem resilience. Our organizations have significant capacity, to contribute support for climate resilience projects. We have our engaged group of volunteers and our ability to apply for funding. For example, the projects that you heard about today, the chum salmon recovery, riparian habitat restoration, and the creation of the 1,000 Rain Garden projects in the Bowker Creek watershed. We would like to collaborate on the specific opportunities to enhance biodiversity while protecting and valuing key natural assets, including our unique Garry Oak ecosystems and the Bowker Creek watershed, reducing infrastructure costs and mitigating the effects of climate change. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else wish to speak to council on this matter? Not seeing any other hands popping up, so we'll come back to this table. We have in front of us the report. Maybe just get started with a motion to receive the report. Move receipt, seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. And the recommendation here is that be endorsed, but probably best to start there. If there's motions to amend, we can do that. But Councilor Green?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councilor Braithwaite.
Just for what the last speaker said, is there a possibility of being able to change some of that engagement around a little bit to include collaboration as per what the request was?
I'll put that question to staff. I think that might substantially change the nature of the consultation piece of it. This is the suggestion that using the IAP2 framework, that some named entities be shifted from involved to consult. I've lost or inform. No, it's.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think what the difference is that earlier in the project, we're still working on what to present to the community. So that only becomes available in the spring. And at that point, we do have a very thorough process of community engagement. Yeah, if council specifically would like to see certain groups referenced more prominently, that could be done. Right now, we are listing verses. Page 14. On page 14, I think there is a reference to community organizations. Let me see here. Yeah, page, what is it? Page 18 of 21. And you can see that in April they're talking about Inform, but the same community interest holders are also listed in May, and at that point we're also involving them. So yeah, it's a bit, we can be happy to hear from council on preferences, but I think we do anticipate to be to have that engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the motion on the floor right now. Don't see any other hands, so unless anybody else wishes to add anything, I'll happy to call the question. I'm going to speak. Go ahead, Councilor Green.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate the previous comments of my colleagues that we be as extensive and inclusive as we can with the engagement piece. This is probably the single most important document that this community will have input into, because it will set the stage for the future growth and development of Oak Bay. And I know that I actually was on the committee in the last OCP review, which was in 2012, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. A lot of the public don't know what OCP is. We use it as an acronym all the time. I think I think that would be helpful too, just to promote what it is, explain what an official community plan is. It may seem obvious to us because we're working with it all the time, but I think the average citizen is not as well informed. So I'm hoping that we engage with as many people and as many organizations that we have a relationship with as possible. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Oh, Councillor Smart.
Well, thank you. I guess just following up this conversation, I wondered if I could, through you, Mayor, just ask a question to staff around the difference between involve and collaborate. Just looking at the community events section, May 2025, on page 18 of 21, when it says involve for those community events. What is the difference between that and collaborating?
If you go to page 10 of 21, there's a simplified IAP2 chart. It's on page 6 of the Modus report, page 10 of 21, 10 of 21 of the overall. It essentially just gives a higher level of partnership for the debate. I think we always run into these things of, maybe I'll just speak to this one really briefly, but we're obligated to keep a fairly even hand at input from everybody. There are certainly incredible expertise in our community, in many of these community groups, but also in some individuals and some other bodies. So I think one of the reasons I've seen this in the past when laying these things out is to make sure that there's a very clear and even input opportunity for everybody. Everybody's allowed input, but there isn't any sort of self-selection of people who have a higher priority in that at this stage of it. People who want to be more engaged and bring more expertise are certainly welcome. So I think that's the rationale of that, but as I was going to speak to before there's things, but go ahead, Councillor Smart.
And sorry, through your worship, no, I think it's also the workshops that we are planning in May will be bordering on that involve, collaborate. They won't just be a drop-in open house where people can then fill in a questionnaire. The intent at this stage is that they would be interactive workshops with participants, but for anybody who attends those workshops rather than specific workshops with a specific group.
Councillor Smart.
Based on that, we have a motion on the table. I would love to make an amendment to add collaborate to May 2025, where it lists the 3 community events, because I do feel like when I look at the definition of involve, it's not collaboration. So I would like to move an amendment to include collaboration under the community events. That's page 18 of 21, or page 14 of the report. And under May 2025, where it says public community interest holders, community events 3, selecting land use scenario, refining policy directions, it just says inform and involve.
Insult to that first of the 2 May things.
Adding the word collaborate.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor to add that. Is there a seconder to make that change?
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'm going to go to the mover first, and I'll go to speakers. Go ahead, Councillor Smart, please speak.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing from staff that the intent is to collaborate, but we're here approving this as the engagement strategy, and it clearly says just to inform and involve for the community events, and I think it's really important that we have that directly in the engagement strategy if that is our intent.
Thank you. Councillor Green?
Yeah, I was just asking myself a question, and that was what the sort of clarity on what collaboration actually means in this context. What would that look like? Through you to staff, is there any way we could sort of clarify what collaborate? So what is the difference between collaborate, involve, and consult? I think it would be helpful to try and define those. Thank you.
But I'll give Director Bowl, give you a chance to answer the question.
Yeah, thank you. I think the chart on page 10 of 21 of this report, of the attachment, shed some light on that. It's between, let me see here. Yeah, the promise in the case of Involve is that the framework says we will work with you to ensure that your concerns and aspirations are directly reflected in the alternatives developed and provide feedback on how public input influenced the decision. And then one step up under collaborate, the same box will say, we will look to you for advice and innovation in formulating solutions and incorporate your advice and recommendations into the decisions to the maximum extent possible. And just as a note there, so we have events planned. What is not currently in scope is to have additional meetings with individual groups, because if that could snowball into quite a big undertaking. So I want to make sure that it's clear that the current scope is focused on those major community events. Yes, we also welcome other input, but if council wants other additional engagements with individual groups, then we probably need to make a more complete list of what groups that might be and who should be included. But that would be an additional effort that currently we're not anticipating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Go to Councillor Patterson. I'll go to second-hand speakers in a minute.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I understand the reason for putting this forward. When I read the document before me, I don't think I can support it, and the reason for that is for the dates that are outlined on this is really about land use scenarios, and in this case, there are already provincial orders that set out the process that we need to follow, and there's a time frame that we need to be able to accomplish all of this in. In my mind, an OCP can be a living document, and the community can have input on things as they change and evolve in the community. So it's not that we do this, we finish it, and you never come back to the document. It's a living document and can be altered. But in these things, it's about land use, and right now we do have a provincial framework that we must follow. And so we don't necessarily, I don't feel, have the leeway to do the whole collaboration. And I think we have to do a very good job of informing and involving residents in what is going to take place. But I don't think in that scenario it allows us the collaboration element that we might normally have.
Councillor Appleton and then Braithwaite.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just following up on Councillor Patterson's comments, I take the comments and I understand the intent of them. I focus in on the language. I support the collaborate option because I focus in on the language of incorporating the decisions to the maximum extent possible. And I think that there are limitations on what is possible for exactly the timeline considerations that Councillor Patterson has described. But I would want to see us take the maximum advantage of community input and community expertise at this juncture, even if we are somewhat limited in the scope of what we would be doing. If we had the timeline to open this up to maximum consideration of maximum elements, we'd be having a different conversation about engagement. So I take the point. I think we should still try to achieve the maximum amount of input from folks who want to provide that on specific elements, and especially about things like we are very constrained by the discussion about housing and how we will achieve housing targets. We're under prescribed timelines from the province. I think despite those things, I think to the extent that we can consider incorporate climate action objectives, those types of considerations at all steps of our planning process, we need to do those things immediately. These are pressing concerns that we have on the table, irrespective of whether or not we have a prescription for certain works from the province. So I'd like to see us achieve that standard exactly as described to the maximum extent possible, and communicate really clearly to partners that we're engaging that there are some limitations as to what we are going to be able to incorporate.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks, Mayor. This is a tough one because I truly hear, I would truly like to see the collaboration portion be expanded. However, I think that when I look at this, I think that staff is going to have a certain amount of collaboration in there anyhow, and to add collaboration with a number of different groups might add onto the timeline for this, and I'm not sure if we can afford to have that. So I think that I would, in hearing what staff said, there will be a certain level of collaboration along with the inform and the consult. So I think I'm going to vote against the motion. Yeah, I'm going to vote against the motion. Thanks.
Any other first-time speakers before we go to second time? I'll speak first. Just my inclination here is twofold. One, everything to the right has got to be better. Everything to the right automatically doubles, triples, or quadruples the time and cost requirements. And so I don't know that if we were to shift this, that we're going to be able to do that in the time frame or the cost measurements that we have attached to it. So I'm torn on this one a little bit. I know that it sounds better to collaborate than involve, but I also look at the definition of involve, and it's, I think, probably the most realistic expectation that we open input from everybody. At the end of the day, we still own the responsibility of the consultant to put together those things. It does not preclude anybody from coming forward with very fully formed ideas and models, and that's incorporating that. But if you actually look, and I've had the opportunity to work in a collaborative IAP2, it is not just, it's sitting down and from ground up working on these pieces as opposed to taking it in. And I really don't know that we can incorporate that without changing the scope and timelines that are assigned to us. And I do take the fact that Modus went through this and provided this as part of the piece. It's always nice to have, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of public input. I just don't know if it's realistic to try and shift that to the right at this point. But go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. The intent of this motion is not to add additional events or to have additional focus groups, but it's to ensure that we have a style of open house that is very similar to what we had for the infill housing, where they had amazing workshops where there were 3 or 4 different participatory things that you could do in the workshop. You could move blocks around on plans. You could actually overlay and sketch on things. It was collaborative. And so I appreciate that there might be some more experience around the table and exactly what that definition means. But when I'm looking at the definitions in the report, the type of open house that I envision, it is definitely under the collaboration style. So again, I'm not intending to have additional events, but to inform the type of event that we will be having for those 3 open houses.
Councillor Green, you want to speak again?
I will, and excuse me, I'm also torn on this one. But, you know, I'm going to err on the side of collaboration because at the end of the day, this is a document that belongs to and reflects the community's wishes for the future. And it's a really important exercise. I think sometimes I feel that communities underplay how important this is, but it's a very important exercise, and it also instills a sense of ownership among community members when they're involved. The flip side is that I trust staff that they've heard us, and we've said, please collaborate wherever you can without creating some monster, and I know that's a concern. But I will support the motion because I do, ultimately, at the end of the day, I do believe that collaboration is important. And I think it makes people feel quite valued in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question before I call the question, and that is just, do we have any sense of what the time and cost impact? I spoke to it, but if we were to make this change, has staff spoken with Modus in terms of the impact of that change? If you haven't spoken to them, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask the question.
No, we haven't. No, we haven't spoken. If council wishes to explore that, then yeah, we would need to go back to Modus to understand what the additional cost of additional workshops are.
That's fine. I take that. If there was a ready answer, then I would have taken it, but that's fine. Councillor Watson, please. then we'll get to the question.
Thank you. In a perfect world, this would not just be an OCP refresh. It would be a really thorough reinvestigation of our OCP, and collaborate would make sense because we would take time to do it. In the context of what we're being required to do in a short amount of time, I'm sorry, but I cannot support moving up to a higher level of engagement. Not that I don't think it's a better one, but I just think that once you do that, you also have integration that you have to do between groups, and it becomes a much more complex exercise. And we have to present clearly to the public what our expectations are of this exercise and what the scope of work really is at the outset, and that's part of a good engagement strategy. But I don't think that we can add collaboration to this portion of the work, given the nature of this particular exercise regarding the OCP and zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm ready to call the question. Also, the motion on the floor right now is to make an amendment to change to add the word collaborate to that section. All in favor of that amendment? And those opposed? Patterson, Braithwaite, Watson, and myself opposed. That does not pass. So we're back to the main motion as laid out here. Any other discussion in the direction forward? Not seeing any. All those in favor? This is on the main motion, Councillor Appleton. Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. I believe that concludes this matter. And moving on then to the 8.1 Development Cost Charge Bylaw. This is for adoption. This has gone through the province for approval and back to our table.
I'll move that Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 4891/2024 be adopted.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Don't usually debate on adoption, but I'm happy to take the chance. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, I will be voting against this. I firmly believe that we need to have development cost charges, but I'm concerned about the units, 4 units and less, and its impact on our infill housing.
Thank you. We'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Smart opposed. That carries. Moving on to 8.2, we have Heritage Revitalization Agreement. We have a team that's been waiting patiently since the beginning of the meeting. Back here again. I think we probably, anyway, the way it works out in our plan, I think we thought the last one would be faster than that. So 8.2, we have a Heritage Revitalization Agreement, HRA 00010. Mr. McStravick, welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. This item concerns a Heritage Revitalization Agreement application for the properties at 1587 York Place and 1562 Prospect Place. It was last in front of Council on the 23rd of September, and it's coming back now in response to direction received that night. Since the 23rd of September, staff have worked with the applicants on a couple of changes to the proposal. There is a revised landscape plan, as described in the report. The affordable housing question has been sorted out to the best of staff's ability in that time. And the application was also referred back to the Heritage Commission in keeping with Council's request. And there are 2 bylaws that are presented to Council for consideration of first and second reading in the case of the HRA bylaw, and first through third reading in the case of the Housing Agreement bylaw. The applicants are here, as you're aware, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicants or staff from members of council? Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. Just what is outlined in the report provides for constraints on the rental of in the suites, and I'm just would like to clarify if the owners of the duplex will be compelled to comply with what is in here, or in fact, if they would be required to rent the secondary suite to a tenant, or be allowed to just use the suite for their own purposes, like a caregiver, a nanny, whatever.
So, Mr. McDravick says on the details of the Section 219 covenant.
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. I just need one moment to double check that in the text of the covenant. 1 second, please.
Thank you. Shocked and horrified that you don't have everything memorized on this.
Well, I'm hearing from my supervisor that the terms of the covenant do not require it to be rented out, but yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don't see other questions. I do have one question on the same item. So is this the affordability question on the suites? I know there's a provincial program which gives grants up to $40,000 for suites that are being rented below market for up to 5 years, minimum of 5 years. Is this covenant sort of superseding that, or just in alignment with that, or is it separate from that? I'm just trying to understand the relationship that we have with our covenant versus what the province is providing within their program. And secondary to that, who's overseeing that then? If it's ours, are we overseeing it? And if it's the province, are they overseeing it?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I believe the program that you're referring to is a grant to help people do renovations to create new suites within their existing homes, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, it's only for renovations.
And in that case, it wouldn't really apply to the current project. And to your second question about who would administer it, it would be up to the property owners to administer it, and the district has sort of an oversight or enforcement authority in this. The covenant gives us the right to sort of request documentary evidence that it's being followed, but we're not going to be having a day-to-day administrative role in this, and I think nor do we want to at this point. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. And just one quick question to the applicant. Can you just, the rationale for the changes to the landscape plan, was there anything that was driving that? Same process as everybody else, Mr. Miller, just your name and municipality residence.
Thank you, Worship. Mike Miller, 1562 Prospect Place. If I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of information, so I'll just look to Kyle. We were just truing up a couple of slight inconsistencies between the various versions and stuff like that, but there was no material changes to the plan.
Mr. Mistravik?
Thank you, Your Worship. It is noted in the report that when this last came to council, the Parks Department had expressed some reservations about the plan, specifically the number of Gary oak trees that were proposed to be planted. The Parks Department thought that it was too high, and that density of planting wouldn't give the trees the adequate ability to thrive in accordance with sound arboricultural practice, arboricultural tree planting. And so that was the impetus for the changes. The applicants worked with us on that. There are fewer Gary oaks being planted in this current plan, and some cash in lieu will potentially come in to the equation as well because of the reduced number of plantings, but it was requested by and supported by our Parks Department. Thank you.
And I concur to that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Don't see other questions at hand here, so I'm happy to go back to this table and get some direction. First off, we can start with a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then procedurally here, obviously, we're just doing first and second reading for the land use portion, and then we can do first, second, and third reading to the housing agreement bylaw, but we won't conclude any of them. So with that, I might just ask that someone read aloud the first and second reading. Go ahead.
That council give first and second readings to 1587 York Place, 1562 Prospect Place, Heritage Revitalization Agreement Authorization Bylaw number 4885, 2025.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. As I had voted against this when it originally came to council, I'll continue to vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for my clarification, when this goes forward, this does go to a public hearing, does it, Mr. Mistravik?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has already directed us to arrange a public hearing for the HRA bylaw. The housing agreement bylaw, though, does not require a public hearing, and that's why council would be able to go 3 readings to that tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
But
the HRA bylaw does require a public hearing, and
that's happening March 3rd. Is that the intention?
Tentatively.
Tentatively? Okay. I won't
you.
formally announce that, but that's sort of the tentative date. Okay, thank you. So we have first and second reading on the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. And then, can you continue, Councillor Smart?
That council give first and second readings to 1587 York Place Housing Agreement Bylaw number 4886, 2025.
Moved and seconded. For seconder, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. Any, third reading?
And that the mayor and corporate
No,
officer.
no, sorry.
Oh,
that-
no.
Sorry. It was a late addition to the.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't have the newer edition.
Can somebody read it?
Where are we here? And that council give third reading to 1587 York Place Housing Agreement Bylaw number 4886, 2025.
Moved and seconded, thank you. All those in favor and opposed, Councillor Braithwaite opposed, that carries. And the last one,
And that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to register a section 219 covenant ensuring the inclusion of secondary suites in the duplex building proposed lot 2 under the rental tenure at a specified rate of affordability.
moved and seconded, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. Okay, that concludes this one. Much less time than the first one. Thank you very much for sticking around. And look forward to that coming back for a public hearing. I'm going to need a motion to extend the meeting by, say, 20 minutes. I think should get us through it all if you want to go through it.
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting until 10:20.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We move to section 9. These are available for public input. I'm going to ask, I think what I'll do is if there's any public input from items number for 9.1, for the items that are available for public input. So these are the first 3 sections. I will take public input at this time. Is there any members of the public, either in person or online, that wish to speak to section 9.1? Not seeing any, then I'm going to come back to this table and just turn it over to staff to do a brief introduction. Welcome, Mr. Green.
Yes, Your Worship, this is the amendment bylaws that Council directed staff to prepare when Council authorised the Committee of the Whole recommendations from November 18th on, I think it was December 9th. And so these amendment bylaws respond to that council direction in relation to an amendment bylaw to the zoning bylaw, driveway access bylaw, parking facilities bylaw, and to the tree bylaw. One thing to note, there is also a few more amendments in relation to the tree bylaw that didn't receive council direction, and those were some housekeeping amendments that my colleagues in Parks and Recreation would like to see to that tree protection bylaw in relation to provide a bit of clarity in relation to a couple of definitions, as well as strengthening the fines and enforcement section of that bylaw. And so we've incorporated those amendments for just to give council a heads up on where those amendments have come from.
Thank you very much. I appreciate there's a lot in this, although it's not a lot of significant changes. There was some it's hard to follow when going back and forth to the bylaws and to the recommended changes. So I think if there's any people wish to speak, ask questions, I can probably do them in sections, but I'm also happy to take questions on anything at this point. I have Councillor Smart and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff. I wondered if staff could please clarify the step back requirements in relation to the height of ADUs, both in like an R1 zone and an R5 zone. So with these increased heights of the ADUs, there would still be, I assume, in an R5 zone, a step back requirement. And does that step back requirement also exist in the R1 zones where it's a 3-meter setback, but then also you would have to step back beyond that 3 meters? Thank you.
Mr. Green?
Through your worship, so the second story setback only applies to a principal building, so that second story setback would not apply to an accessory dwelling unit. The changes to the ADUs are in the R1 and R2 zones to increase that the rear setback from 1.5 meters to 3 meters, and the interior side from 1.5 to 3 meters anyway, in the R1 and R2 zone. I think, does that answer your question?
Please continue.
My next question is just with regards to townhouses and the changes to the bylaw with regards to driveway access. Could you just, through you, Mayor, to staff, is it possible to clarify, for example, if there is a corner lot that somebody wants to put 3 townhouses on, can they have 3 driveways, or absolutely not with the way these changes have just been proposed? Thank you.
It's my understanding, and I will, when I answer this question, I will to my colleague in engineering to confirm this. My understanding is if somebody is doing a townhouse project on a corner, then they could have 3 or 4 driveways to each of those units. A driveway to each of those units.
I think as long as it doesn't exceed 40% of the total.
Correct. Yes.
Frontage.
Yes, and that and provided the director of engineering has determined that the location is not compromising safety.
That the record shows the Director of Engineering and
Nodded.
is nodding in the background. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. My next question is just with regards to the comments around the second floor deck. I just didn't quite understand the heights and screening, and in reading the bylaw, I didn't understand the larger sort of intent upon what I assume are privacy concerns with the second floor deck for, I think it was ADUs. If you could potentially just bring any clarity to the concept around the changes.
Director Green.
Yes, through your worship. So take the I think it's R4 or R5. I think it's in actually all zones. R4. There is a new clause that says any deck above the first story shall be at a distance of no less than 3 metres from an interior side or rear lot line, unless the deck is screened by a fence or structure, no less than 1.8 metres in height, and in no case shall a deck be located less than 2 metres from a lot line.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just to, I think I was, through you, Mayor, to staff, just having trouble understanding the screening part of that. So it's a second floor deck. So that I imagine that could be a balcony or like a deck over a living space below. I'm just wondering about, I just didn't quite understand the screening. Could you just elaborate on what that would be? Like, is that like a tall guard or?
Give that over to staff, Mr. Green.
Is it on the ground or well, it's at the second story, isn't it?
I think what I might actually do is a little suggestion here, given the time of evening, if amenable, because I have some questions on this, on the zoning change pieces as well, on some of these sort of aspects, to tease them out. Just given the time of day, maybe we can consider the public input portions, which are a little bit more straightforward, the parking, the driveway access, and the tree protection. And perhaps we might just want to refer this, that last section to a meeting either, I talked to staff about if there's space, and we could probably do it after the committee of the whole next week, and just have a special council meeting to look at it, and perhaps share some of these questions with staff ahead of time. I'm just thinking that might be better, just as opposed to going through, because I think we're getting into some of the nuances of the effect of some of these. That might be just a thought, because I think just given the time of evening here, that we might be getting into, because I think there might be some other questions on this particular one as well. Just a thought from so Councillor Smart, I don't know how many questions you have there, but I know I have some, and
I just had one more if you want me to finish, and then which is just with regards to the changes to the commercial building heights, because there wasn't something struck out, but they were in red. I just wasn't sure if there was changes to commercial building heights on page 153. That's my last question.
Sure. I don't think we're making any changes to the commercial, but if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. 153, is that what you said? Oh, the joy of 211-page reports to go through.
Through your worship, yeah, so those changes are just to clarify in relation to heights of an accessory building and accessory structure in that commercial zone, and also just to, in relation to building height, just to, so as previously it said building height, but we've then added building height where up to 2 dwelling units are located within a principal building, just to make it clear that what the building height is of that principal building.
That's sufficient.
As opposed to just a commercial, as opposed to just a commercial building.
Okay.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. I'm still really in questions, but I'm going to suggest that we might just want to keep our questions to the first 3 and try and move through those if there's willingness. But I don't want to rush any of these. None of these are so time sensitive that they're critical, but I think we should get through as much of the business as we can tonight. Councillor Braithwaite, you have the floor next.
Thank you. Mine was around the parking on attachment number 4. The text amendments say by deleting section A1.1D and replacing it with the following. And can you just tell me what it was, what A11D originally was? Was it a 1 parking space? And so this recommendation is to change it to 0.5. Is that, am I correct on that?
Mr. Green?
No, it's such a minor typo that, so there's essentially a adding of a 1 so that it makes, yeah, that it provides exactly what it should say really, but it's such a minor typo to that, I find that, yeah, it's such a minor typo.
Okay.
Get some clarification if you want. but
Yeah, no, you mean,
Mr. Bull?
it was just an add, so the adding a 1 to the actual numbering system is what you're saying. Okay, so this was, okay, I gotcha. Thank you.
A very minor housekeeping thing, yes, okay. Oh. Thank you. I don't have any questions. I have no questions on the first 3 items personally, so if anybody else doesn't either, I might. Why don't we just start with getting the report received?
Received.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And then I'm going to suggest we try and go through the first and second reading of driveway access bylaw, if people are
I'll
willing.
move that we give first and second reading to driveway access bylaw number 3550, 1987 amendment bylaw number 4896, 2025.
Seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed.
And I'll move that council give third reading to driveway access bylaw number 3558, 1987 amendment bylaw number 4896, 2025.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. There's a debate on third reading. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries.
And I'll move that council give first and second reading to parking facilities bylaw number 3540, 1986 amendment bylaw number 4895, 2025.
Your seconder? Seconded. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing any? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move that council give third reading to parking facilities bylaw number 3550, 1986 amendment bylaw 3540, 1986 amendment bylaw number 4895, 2025.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And
Carries.
I'll move that council give first and second reading to tree protection bylaw number 4742, 2020 amendment bylaw number 4893, 2025.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Just want to say thank you to park staff and you to work together on this one. It was good to see that the opportunity was taken to make those other changes. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move that council give third reading to tree protection bylaw number 4742, 2020 amendment bylaw number 4893, 2025.
Seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Then here's my suggestion on this one, given the time, is that we refer, is that the right thing? Refer this to the next, just defer? Okay. Okay, right, thank you, sorry. I know this, but it's 10:12, this is why I want to defer it. I'm just going to suggest, and I can't force it, but I'm going to suggest that we defer this item to a special committee of the whole next, is that, well, I'll turn to staff. Is it better to do that or just to the February 24th council meeting.
Yes, thank you. You could defer it to, like you said, to a special council meeting to immediately follow the committee of the whole meeting next week.
Is that, we're down to one item on this, and I think if we get questions ahead of time, it shouldn't take a lot. Is it procedurally more hassle to do it there than it is at just take
Oh,
add it
instead
to
of
the
February
the
24th?
Yeah. I just don't know how big the February 24th meeting is, so.
There are several items. I would look to this CAO for.
Okay, well, why don't we move to the special next week, and if worst case scenario, if that committee goes long, we can always defer it again to the next one, so, okay.
I'll make a motion to defer this item to a special council meeting after the committee of the whole on February 17th.
18th, right, Family Day.
February 18th.
Thank you. Moved and seconded, thank you. Discussion on the deferral motion, yeah, Councillor Smart.
I would, despite all of the questions I had, prefer to move it forward tonight, so I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay, thank you. I'll speak briefly in support. Just, I do have some questions, and I think in fairness, I probably should have submitted them ahead of time to staff, but they're just to coalesce it all together. And you've raised some additional ones for me, Councillor Smart, so I think I'd like to just tease this one out and not rush this one because it has more impact on things. So I am supportive of the deferral motion. So I'm going to call, let's see other hands. None. Call the question. All those in favor of deferral and opposed? Councillor Smart opposed. That carries. Any new business? Usually have that ahead of time. Notice of motion. So this is in the record today and will be considered at the February 24th meeting. Thank you, Councillor Appleton, for bringing this forward. It's timely. I did see that there were some tariffs being applied even today at the last second. So I think we're going to be, anyway, times of chaos abound. Thank you for submitting that and like that. And then we move to correspondence from other governments or agencies.
Move receipt.
Motion to receive, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Yeah, do we want to have any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That is received.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. And Councillor Appleton, I hope you have a productive time away.
Thank you, Your Worship.